You have been taught to believe that peace comes from finally knowing, from getting the answer, from hearing the apology, and from understanding why everything happened. But if that were true, why do so many people receive closure and still feel empty? Why does the mind keep returning to the same pain, asking one more question, searching for one more explanation, and hoping that certainty will finally make it rest? The truth is that the ego does not only want peace, it wants closure, control, and certainty. It wants the past to make sense, the future to feel safe, and every ending to come with a clear reason. It believes that if it can understand everything, predict everything, and manage everything, then nothing will hurt again. But life does not offer that kind of guarantee, and the more tightly you demand it, the more suffering you create. Buddhist wisdom teaches a different path. Peace begins when you want less explanation, less control, less certainty, less need for life to follow the picture in your mind. It begins when you stop asking the past to change, when you stop forcing people to understand you, and when you stop treating uncertainty like an enemy. As you listen to these lessons, something inside you will begin to loosen. The need for answers will become quieter. The fear of what comes next will lose its grip. The weight of trying to control everything will slowly fall from your shoulders. You will see that not every ending needs a verdict, not every pain needs an explanation, and not every future needs to be known before you can live fully. This is not about giving up. It is about becoming free. The ego wants closure, control, and certainty, but peace begins when you want less. Are you ready? Let us begin. The moment you stop demanding that life explain itself, something inside you begins to breathe again. Yet this is often where the ego makes its final attempt to keep you trapped. It whispers that you are almost free, but first you need one last answer, one last conversation, one final explanation. It promises that closure will end the pain. But sometimes, the search for closure is the very thing preventing the pain from ending. There are experiences that seem unfinished because they did not end the way your mind expected. Someone walked away without explaining why. A friendship slowly disappeared without a clear argument. A person hurt you and continued living as though nothing happened. A relationship ended while important words were still trapped inside you. You may have been left with silence where an apology should have been, confusion where honesty should have been, and questions where certainty should have been. The mind does not like an empty space. It wants to fill every silence with a reason. It begins examining old conversations, looking for hidden meanings in small details. It remembers the tone of a voice, the delay before a reply, the final expression on someone's face. It searches through the past as though one forgotten clue could suddenly explain everything. This may feel like healing, but often it is the ego trying to regain control over something that has already happened. Closure sounds peaceful, but the desire for it can become another form of attachment. You are no longer attached only to the person or the event. You become attached to the idea that the past must give you something before you are allowed to move forward. You tell yourself that you will let go when they apologize, when they admit what they did, when you understand their true intentions, or when you finally get the chance to say everything you were unable to say. Without noticing it, your freedom is placed in someone else's hands. You may believe you are waiting for an explanation, but you are also waiting for another person to unlock a door that is already open. You remain seated in a room they left long ago because the ego insists that leaving without answers would mean the story defeated you. It tells you that moving on without closure would make the pain meaningless. It convinces you that peace must be earned through complete understanding. Buddhist wisdom offers a quieter truth. Understanding can be helpful, but it is not always necessary for release. Sometimes the deepest freedom comes from accepting that the past will never become clearer than it is now. Some people do not understand themselves well enough to explain what they did. Some know the truth but are too ashamed to speak it. Some protect their image by changing the story. Others have already moved on and no longer feel responsible for the confusion they created. If your peace depends on receiving truth from someone who benefits from hiding it, you may wait forever. The ego struggles with this because it believes every effect must lead back to a satisfying cause. When something hurts deeply, the mind thinks the explanation must be equally deep. It may be difficult to accept that a life-changing wound came from someone's immaturity, fear, selfishness, confusion, or lack of awareness. You search for a grand reason because the pain feels too important to have come from something so ordinary. But people sometimes cause enormous suffering for very small reasons. They avoid difficult conversations because they are uncomfortable. They disappear because honesty would expose them. They betray trust because they want immediate pleasure. They become cruel because cruelty protects them from shame. They choose silence because silence requires less courage than accountability. The explanation may not be mysterious. It may simply be disappointing. This is one reason closure can be painful even when it arrives. You may finally receive the answer and discover that it changes nothing. The person may tell you why they left, but the loss remains. They may admit they were wrong, but the years cannot be returned. They may apologize, but your body still remembers the fear. They may explain their choices, but the explanation does not make those choices acceptable. The ego often imagines closure as a perfect moment in which everything falls into place. You picture a conversation where the other person finally understands your pain. They speak honestly. They take responsibility. They show regret. You express yourself clearly. You leave feeling light, respected, and complete. Real conversations rarely follow this script. The person may deny what happened. They may minimize it. They may blame you. They may apologize only to end the conversation. They may remember events differently. They may become defensive when faced with the consequences of their actions. Instead of receiving closure, you may leave with more questions than before. This does not mean seeking clarity is always wrong. Honest conversation can repair misunderstandings, deepen relationships, and prevent resentment. But there is a difference between asking for clarity and demanding that clarity save you. One is communication. The other is dependence. You can ask a question without making your future depend on the answer. You can express pain without requiring the other person to agree with your version of events. You can speak honestly without believing that perfect words will force someone to become accountable. You can offer a final conversation while understanding that the other person may not have the emotional maturity to give you what you hoped to receive. This is where inner freedom begins. You stop confusing closure with permission. You no longer wait for someone else to approve your decision to heal. The Buddha taught that attachment is one of the roots of suffering. Most people hear the word attachment and think only of clinging to people, possessions, status, or pleasure. But the mind can also cling to explanations. It can cling to fairness. It can cling to the belief that every story must end in a way that feels complete. You may not want the person back. You may not want the old situation restored. Yet you may still be attached to the idea that they owe you understanding. This attachment can survive long after love has disappeared. It can keep the emotional bond alive through anger, resentment, and repeated questioning. Hatred can become a rope just as easily as affection. As long as your mind keeps returning to someone and demanding payment for the past, part of you remains connected to them. The payment may be an apology, regret, recognition, punishment, or proof that they lost something valuable. You may secretly hope that life will teach them a lesson, so you can finally feel that justice has been done. This desire is understandable. When someone harms you, it is natural to want balance restored. But your healing cannot depend on watching another person suffer. If it does, you remain emotionally controlled by their life. Their happiness irritates you. Their success feels unfair. Their silence feels like victory. Their pain becomes something you wait for. Peace cannot grow while you are studying another person's consequences. Karma, in Buddhist teaching, is often misunderstood as a system of instant reward and punishment. It is not simply the belief that anyone who hurts you will soon experience the same pain. Karma points to the way actions shape the mind, character, and future conditions. A dishonest person may appear comfortable while becoming increasingly unable to form honest relationships. A selfish person may gain advantages while slowly creating a life without real trust. A cruel person may avoid visible punishment while living inside a mind that must constantly defend itself. You do not need to supervise this process. You do not have to stay emotionally present in someone's life to make sure the universe handles them correctly. Their path belongs to them. Your path is to decide what kind of mind you will build from what happened. The ego says, "I cannot move forward until this is resolved." Wisdom asks, what if moving forward is how it becomes resolved? Closure may not be a conversation. It may be a decision repeated many times. It may be the moment you stop checking whether they sent a message. It may be the day you no longer search their name. It may be choosing not to explain yourself again. It may be accepting that you have already said enough. It may be removing your attention from a story that has consumed too much of your life. This kind of closure is quieter than the ego expects. There is no dramatic final scene, no perfect apology, no moment where every question disappears. There is simply a growing unwillingness to continue carrying what cannot be changed. At first, letting go may feel incomplete. Your mind may return to the same questions. Why did they do it? Was any of it real? Did I miss the signs? What would have happened if I had acted differently? These questions can appear important because they are emotionally charged. But not every question deserves endless attention. Some questions are doors, others are circles. A useful question leads to understanding, responsibility, or wiser action. It helps you see a pattern, strengthen a boundary, or make a different choice. A circular question keeps you mentally moving without taking you anywhere. It creates the feeling of work without producing freedom. Why did this person choose dishonesty? May never be fully answered. What will I do when I notice dishonesty again? Can change your life. Why was I not enough? Is often built on a false belief. Why did I remain where I was not respected? May reveal something you can heal. Will they ever understand what they did? Places your attention on their awareness. What do I now understand about what I need? Returns your attention to your own life. The ego prefers questions that keep the other person at the center. Wisdom asks questions that return you to yourself. This is not self-blame. There is a major difference between taking responsibility for your healing and taking responsibility for another person's harmful choices. You did not cause everything that happened to you. You could not control another person's honesty, loyalty, maturity, or compassion. But you can decide what happens inside you now. Self-blame says, their actions prove something is wrong with me. Responsibility says, their actions hurt me, but they will not decide who I become. When closure becomes attachment, you may repeatedly tell the story of what happened. Sharing pain can be healthy, especially when you are trying to understand it. But there comes a point when repeating the story no longer releases the wound. It strengthens the identity built around it. Each retelling may make the roles more fixed. They become permanently cruel. You become permanently betrayed. The past becomes a courtroom in which the same evidence is presented every day, but no final judgment brings peace. The mind may become so familiar with the story that releasing it feels like losing part of yourself. You may wonder who you will be without the anger, the questions, or the need to prove what happened. Pain can become an identity when it has been carried for a long time. The ego may prefer a painful identity to the uncertainty of becoming someone new. This is why healing sometimes feels frightening. You are not only releasing an event, you are releasing the version of yourself who organized life around that event. There may have been strength in that version of you. It survived. It learned. It protected you. It made sense of what seemed unbearable. You do not need to hate that self or feel ashamed of how long the pain lasted. You can thank that part of you for carrying you through the hardest season. Then you can gently say, you no longer have to stand guard. Buddhist practice does not ask you to force thoughts away. What you fight often grows stronger. Instead, you learn to observe the thought without obeying it. When the mind says, I need one final answer, you can notice the longing. You can feel where it appears in the body. Perhaps the chest tightens, the stomach becomes heavy, the jaw hardens, the breath becomes shallow. Rather than following the thought into another hour of analysis, return to the body. Breathe slowly. Name what is present. Confusion is here. Sadness is here. Anger is here. Longing is here. Notice the language. You do not say, I am confusion. You say, confusion is here. This small shift reminds you that the emotion is an experience passing through awareness. It is not your entire identity. Feelings move when they are allowed to be felt. They remain stuck when the mind constantly turns them into stories. Sadness may need tears, not an explanation. Anger may need a boundary, not another argument. Disappointment may need acceptance, not more investigation. Grief may need time, not a verdict. The search for closure can sometimes be an attempt to avoid grief. If you keep searching for answers, you do not have to fully accept that something is over. The investigation creates activity. It gives the mind a task. Grief, however, asks you to sit with what cannot be repaired. This is why the mind may prefer confusion. Confusion contains hope. As long as you are still trying to understand, the story feels unfinished. If the story is unfinished, perhaps the person will return. Perhaps a final conversation will change everything. Perhaps new information will make the loss less real. Acceptance closes a door that the ego wants to keep slightly open. Yet acceptance is not agreement. It does not mean what happened was right. It does not mean you approve of betrayal, neglect, cruelty, or abandonment. Acceptance means recognizing that the event has already entered reality. Your refusal to accept it cannot remove it from the past. It can only keep the struggle alive in the present. You can say, this should not have happened, while also admitting, it did happen. Both statements can exist together. One honors your values, the other honors reality. Suffering deepens when the mind repeats only the first statement. This should not have happened. They should have treated me better. They should have told the truth. They should have stayed. They should have understood. Perhaps they should have. But the past does not change because your argument is correct. The ego often believes that releasing the argument means declaring the other person innocent. That is not true. You can stop carrying the trial without changing your judgment about the behavior. You can understand that someone harmed you and still refuse to spend the rest of your life proving it. Forgiveness is also not required for closure. People often pressure themselves to forgive before they are ready. They believe spiritual growth means feeling no anger and offering immediate compassion. This can become another way of silencing real pain. Forgiveness, when it comes, should not be used to deny the wound. It may simply mean you no longer want to poison your present with the past. It does not require reconciliation. It does not require restored access. It does not require trusting someone who has shown they are unsafe. You can release hatred and keep the boundary. You can wish someone freedom from ignorance and still refuse to invite them back into your life. Compassion does not mean allowing repeated harm. Buddhist compassion includes yourself. A boundary can be an act of compassion when it prevents resentment, protects dignity, and stops unhealthy behavior from continuing. Sometimes the closure you seek is hidden inside the boundary you are afraid to set. You may continue asking for explanations because accepting the truth would require action. Perhaps their repeated behavior already gave you the answer. Perhaps the missing apology is not the main problem. The main problem may be that you keep hoping words will cancel a pattern. Words can clarify intentions. Patterns reveal character. A person may say they care while repeatedly disappearing when you need them. They may promise honesty while hiding important things. They may apologize beautifully and then repeat the same behavior. The ego clings to each new conversation because conversations allow hope to survive. Wisdom looks at the pattern. Closure may come when you stop asking what they mean and begin observing what they consistently do. This can be painful because clarity sometimes arrives without comfort. You may realize that the answer was present long before you wanted to accept it. Their lack of effort was an answer. Their repeated disrespect was an answer. Their refusal to communicate was an answer. Their comfort with your pain was an answer. Silence does not always tell you why someone acted as they did, but it can tell you what they are willing to do now. That may be enough information to choose peace. There is also closure you may need to give yourself. Perhaps you are waiting for someone else to forgive you. You regret what you did. You have apologized, changed your behavior, and tried to repair the harm, but the other person does not want contact. The ego may insist that you cannot heal until they release you. Their forgiveness belongs to them. Your responsibility is sincere remorse, honest repair where possible, and changed conduct. You cannot force another person to accept your apology. Turning your guilt into endless self-punishment does not undo the past. It only creates another person who is suffering. True remorse should become wisdom. Ask what the mistake revealed. What fear controlled you? What need were you trying to satisfy? What truth did you avoid? What pattern must end with you? Then let your future actions become the apology you continue living. You may never receive a final conversation, but your life can still become a final answer. The answer can be that you became gentler without becoming weak. You became wiser without becoming bitter. You learned to recognize manipulation without distrusting everyone. You learned to love without abandoning yourself. You learned that another person's inability to value you does not reduce your value. This is a form of closure no one can take away because it does not depend on their participation. The past may still visit you. A song, place, date, smell, or familiar phrase may suddenly bring back the old feeling. This does not mean you have failed to heal. Memory is not the same as attachment. A scar can ache without becoming a new wound. When the memory returns, do not immediately search for meaning. Let it be a memory. Notice it. Breathe. Offer yourself kindness. Then return to what is here. The present may be simple. A chair beneath you, air entering the lungs, a sound outside the window, light crossing the room. These ordinary details seem small, but they are the doorway back to life. The ego lives in unfinished stories. Awareness lives in the present moment. Each time you return to the present, you loosen the past's claim over your attention. You may need to do this many times. Letting go is rarely one heroic act. It is often a quiet choice made whenever the mind tries to reopen what cannot be changed. You choose not to send the message. You choose not to replay the argument. You choose not to check for signs. You choose not to build another explanation. You choose to place your energy where life is still happening. Over time, the question changes. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What is life asking from me now?" Perhaps it is asking you to rest, perhaps to rebuild trust slowly, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to walk away, perhaps to become more honest about your needs, perhaps to stop pursuing people who make you prove your worth, perhaps to notice that your deepest pain is not only about what happened, but about an older wound the event awakened. The past can become a teacher without remaining your home. This is the middle way. You do not deny what happened, and you do not live inside it. You do not erase the memory, and you do not worship it. You do not pretend the wound had no effect, and you do not allow it to define every future relationship. You carry the wisdom and leave the weight. One practical way to begin is to write the answer you may never receive. Do not write what you wish the other person would say. Write what you now know. Write what their actions taught you. Write what you will no longer tolerate. Write what you forgive yourself for not seeing earlier. Write what you are choosing from this day forward. Then read it not as a message to them, but as a promise to yourself. You may write, "I may never know every reason, but I know how I felt. I may never receive an apology, but I believe my own experience. I may never be understood by them, but I will stop abandoning myself to gain understanding. I cannot change what happened, but I can decide what I continue carrying." These words do not magically remove grief. They return authority to you. Another practice is to notice how often you use the phrase, "I need to know." Pause and ask whether you truly need the information or whether the ego wants relief from uncertainty. Some knowledge is necessary for safety, decisions, and honest communication. Other knowledge is sought only because the mind believes uncertainty is unbearable. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it is survivable. You have already lived through many days without complete answers. You have made decisions with limited information. You have cared for people without knowing how long they would remain. You have walked into seasons you could not predict. Life has always contained uncertainty. The difference is that certain wounds make you suddenly demand a guarantee that life has never given anyone. Peace grows when you stop treating uncertainty as a personal punishment. Not knowing does not mean you are powerless. It means you are human. You may not know why someone changed, but you can know what treatment you accept. You may not know whether they regret losing you, but you can know that your life deserves your full attention. You may not know whether the future will bring another loss, but you can know that fear will not protect you from living. The desire for closure says, "I must solve the past before I can enter the future." Wisdom says, "I can enter the future carrying only what the past taught me." There will come a day when the old question enters your mind and feels lighter. You may notice that hours passed without thinking about it. Then days. The memory may remain, but the urgency disappears. You no longer need to solve it. You no longer need to defend your version to an imaginary audience. You no longer rehearse what you would say if the person returned. This is how closure often arrives, not as an answer, but as the end of your need for one. The ego expected a final conversation. Peace gave you a quiet morning. The ego expected an apology. Peace gave you distance. The ego expected certainty. Peace gave you the strength to live without it. The ego expected the past to explain itself. Peace taught you that your life did not have to remain paused while you waited. When you stop demanding that every wound make sense, you create space for something more valuable than explanation. You create space for compassion, self-respect, wisdom, and new experience. You stop looking backward for the key to a door that opens from the inside. The past may remain incomplete. Let it. Some stories do not end with justice, some relationships do not end with honesty, some questions remain unanswered because no answer could fully satisfy the heart. Yet your life can still become peaceful, meaningful, and whole. Wholeness does not mean every missing piece returns. It means the missing pieces no longer prevent you from living. So when the mind asks for one last answer, listen gently. Do not shame it. It is trying to protect you from confusion and pain. Thank it for trying. Then remind it that you no longer need complete understanding to choose freedom. You can honor what happened without carrying it every day. You can remember without returning. You can grieve without waiting. You can move forward without permission. Closure can become the ego's final form of attachment because it makes release depend on something outside you. But the moment you stop requiring the past to explain itself, the attachment begins to weaken. You understand that peace was never hidden inside another person's words. It was waiting inside your willingness to stop asking yesterday to become different. And once you see this clearly, another hidden struggle appears. The ego does not only demand answers about the past, it also believes that pain can be accepted only when every cause is understood. Yet, the need to understand everything may quietly prevent the acceptance you have been searching for. And once you stop demanding that the past explain itself, another struggle becomes visible. The mind may release its need for one final answer, yet still insist that it must understand every cause, every motive, and every detail before it can accept what happened. This sounds wise, but it can become another cage. Sometimes the search for understanding does not lead you out of pain. It only teaches you how to walk in circles inside it. There are moments in life that refuse to become clear. A person changes without warning. A loving relationship becomes cold. A trusted friend acts against you. An opportunity disappears when everything seemed to be going well. An illness arrives without fairness. A family breaks under pressures no one fully understands. You search for the reason because pain feels easier to carry when it has a shape. The mind believes that if it can explain the suffering, it can control its meaning. It says, "Once I understand why this happened, I will know how to feel." It begins collecting details, comparing memories, studying behavior, and rebuilding the event from every possible angle. It wants a complete picture because incompleteness feels unsafe. But life does not always provide a complete picture. People act from hidden fears they cannot name. They make decisions while confused, wounded, jealous, ashamed, or emotionally exhausted. They may not understand their own motives, even when they speak with confidence. Circumstances combine in ways no single explanation can capture. Timing, personality, history, desire, fear, habit, and chance may all play a part. You may spend years looking for one clear cause when there were many small causes moving together. The ego dislikes this because it wants a clean answer. It wants to point to one moment and say, "That is why everything changed." It wants one person to blame, one mistake to correct, or one lesson that makes the entire experience understandable. A simple explanation gives the mind a feeling of order. Reality is often less organized. A marriage may not end because of one argument. It may end through years of unspoken disappointment, changing needs, poor communication, pride, fear, and emotional distance. A friendship may not disappear because of one offense. It may weaken through neglect, different values, jealousy, new responsibilities, or a silence that lasted too long. A personal failure may not come from laziness alone. It may involve poor preparation, lack of support, fear, wrong timing, exhaustion, and choices that seemed harmless when they were made. When the mind demands one perfect explanation, it may reject every partial truth because none feels complete enough. This is where understanding can block acceptance. You keep waiting for a level of clarity that may never come. You treat acceptance as a reward that will be given only after every mystery has been solved. Until then, you remain emotionally suspended. You cannot fully release the event because you are still studying it. You cannot enter the present because you are still rebuilding the past. Buddhist wisdom teaches that clarity and acceptance are not the same thing. Clarity may help you see what happened. Acceptance helps you stop fighting the fact that it happened. You can have one without having the other. You may understand someone's childhood, fears, and emotional wounds, yet still refuse to accept that they are unable to treat you well. You may understand every detail of a loss and still fight reality each morning. You may know exactly why a plan failed and still remain bitter that it did. Knowledge does not automatically create peace. In the same way, you may lack a full explanation and still accept what is now true. You may not know why someone changed, but you can accept that they have changed. You may not know why a door closed, but you can accept that it is closed. You may not understand why life took a certain direction, but you can accept that this is where you are standing. Acceptance begins with what is present, not with what is perfectly explained. This can feel frightening because many people confuse acceptance with surrendering their intelligence. They think accepting something without understanding it means becoming passive, careless, or easily deceived. They fear that if they stop asking why, they will miss an important lesson. But acceptance does not forbid questions. It changes your relationship with them. You can investigate without becoming consumed. You can seek truth without postponing your peace. You can learn what is available without believing that every missing detail must be found. You can say, "I want to understand," without saying, "I cannot live until I understand." One desire is open, the other is a demand. The open mind gathers information and remains willing to learn. The demanding mind believes an answer must arrive in a certain form. When it does not, frustration grows. The person may reject useful insight because it does not satisfy the emotional hunger beneath the question. Often, the mind is not truly asking for understanding, it is asking for relief. When you ask, "Why did this happen?" you may really be asking, "How can I make sure I never feel this way again?" When you ask, "Why did they choose someone else?" you may be asking, "Was I ever valuable?" When you ask, "Why did life take this from me?" you may be asking, "Can I still trust life?" The surface question may be intellectual, but the deeper need is emotional. This matters because facts cannot always answer emotional wounds. You may discover why someone acted as they did and still feel rejected. You may learn the medical reason for a loss and still feel that the world is unfair. You may understand the conditions that caused a failure and still fear trying again. An explanation can inform the mind while leaving the heart untouched. The heart may need something different. It may need compassion. It may need rest. It may need to feel safe again. It may need permission to grieve. It may need time without pressure. It may need a new experience that slowly challenges the old fear. Trying to solve an emotional wound only through analysis is like trying to warm a cold room by describing the weather. The description may be accurate, but it does not create warmth. This is why overthinking can feel productive while keeping you stuck. The mind remains busy, so you believe healing is taking place. You replay conversations, study personalities, read about behavior, and search for hidden meanings. You may learn many useful things, but if the process never leads to a different way of living, it becomes another form of avoidance. Insight should eventually become action. If you understand that someone repeatedly ignores your boundaries, the next step is not another month of analysis. It may be distance. If you understand that fear causes you to avoid opportunities, the next step may be one small act of courage. If you understand that a certain environment keeps you anxious, the next step may be changing what you can. Understanding without action can become a comfortable hiding place. You remain a student of your suffering instead of becoming someone who walks beyond it. There is also a hidden pride inside the need to understand everything. The ego believes the mind should be able to solve life. It sees confusion as failure. It thinks that enough intelligence, attention, or spiritual knowledge should make every event clear. But wisdom begins when you respect the limits of your mind. A single person cannot see every force that shapes an event. You see your memories, your feelings, and the information available to you. Others see different parts. Some facts are hidden. Some motives change over time. Some consequences appear years later. The full truth may be larger than any one person's view. This does not make truth meaningless. It teaches humility. Humility says, I will understand what I can, but I will not pretend that my view is complete. It leaves room for uncertainty without turning uncertainty into panic. It recognizes that not knowing everything is not a personal weakness. It is part of being human. The Buddha often warned against becoming trapped in questions that do not lead to freedom. This does not mean curiosity is wrong. It means a question should be judged by where it takes the mind. Does the question make you more awake, compassionate, and responsible? Or does it increase anger, fear, and obsession? Does it help you act wisely? Or does it keep you waiting? Does it reveal something useful? Or does it only reopen the same wound? A question can sound deep while leading nowhere. A person struck by an arrow does not first need to know who made the arrow, where the wood came from, what the attacker was thinking, or why the event occurred. The wound needs attention. If every answer must arrive before care begins, the suffering becomes worse. Life often gives us emotional arrows. The mind wants to study the attacker while the heart is still bleeding. It wants to understand every cause before offering itself care, but healing must sometimes begin before explanation. You can soothe the nervous system before you understand the entire history of your fear. You can leave an unhealthy place before you know why you stayed so long. You can stop arguing with someone before you fully understand their behavior. You can rest before you know exactly why you are exhausted. Care does not need complete knowledge to begin. This is especially important when you are dealing with unfairness. The mind assumes unfair events must contain a hidden reason that will make them easier to accept. It searches for a lesson, a moral, or a purpose. It wants to believe that everything happened for a clear and necessary cause. But not every painful event needs to be called necessary. Some things happen because people are careless. Some happen because systems are unjust. Some happen because bodies are fragile. Some happen because nature is unpredictable. Some happen through a combination of choices and conditions no one planned. You do not have to call suffering good in order to accept that it occurred. Forcing a positive meaning too quickly can become another rejection of reality. You may tell yourself that everything happens for the best while part of you is still deeply hurt. You may search for a blessing before you have allowed yourself to name the loss. This does not create acceptance. It covers pain with a sentence. Real acceptance is more honest. It says, "This was painful. This was unfair. I wish it had been different. I may never fully understand it. And still, this is part of my life now." These words do not celebrate suffering. They stop the inner war against facts that cannot be removed. The ego wants a reason that makes the pain acceptable. Wisdom learns that pain can be accepted even when the reason is unsatisfying. Consider how often people remain trapped in the question of whether an event was fair. Fairness matters. It guides moral action, justice, and human relationships. But reality does not always follow fairness. When the mind believes peace can come only after life becomes fair, it gives the world an impossible condition. You may deserve an apology and never receive it. You may work hard and still lose. You may act with kindness and still be misunderstood. You may prepare carefully and still face an unexpected setback. Acceptance does not say fairness is unimportant. It says, your inner life cannot be held hostage until the world corrects every imbalance. You can work for justice without allowing injustice to destroy your mind. You can name what was wrong without letting that wrong become the only truth you see. You can protect others from harm without carrying hatred as proof that you care. This balance requires strength. It is easier to either deny the pain or become completely identified with it. The middle path asks you to see the suffering clearly while refusing to become only the person who suffered. The need to understand everything can also appear in self-judgment. You may study your own mistakes with harsh intensity. Why did I trust them? Why did I ignore the signs? Why did I stay? Why was I afraid? Why did I not know better? These questions may sound responsible, but they can hide cruelty. You judge your past self using knowledge that became available only later. You expect the person you were then to have the wisdom you gained through the experience. This is unfair. Your past self acted with the awareness, needs, fears, and resources available at that time. This does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means understanding without punishment. You can recognize that you ignored a warning without calling yourself foolish. You can admit that fear influenced your choice without deciding you are weak. You can see that loneliness made you accept less than you deserved without treating loneliness as a crime. Compassion allows you to learn without becoming your own enemy. Sometimes the need to understand your own behavior becomes endless because you are trying to discover a reason that removes all guilt. You hope to find an explanation that proves you had no choice. But maturity does not require complete innocence. You may have been hurt and still hurt someone else. You may have acted from fear and still caused damage. You may have lacked awareness and still need to make amends. Acceptance says, there were reasons for my behavior, but reasons are not always excuses. This allows responsibility without shame. Shame says, I am bad. Responsibility says, I acted badly and I can choose differently. Shame freezes identity. Responsibility opens a path. The search for complete understanding can freeze identity in another way. You may create a fixed explanation for yourself. You say, I am this way because of my childhood, or I cannot trust because of what happened. The explanation may contain truth, but it becomes harmful when it turns into a final sentence. Your history influences you. It does not have to imprison you. Understanding the origin of a wound is useful when it helps you respond differently. It becomes limiting when you use it to predict that change is impossible. The ego may prefer a complete explanation because explanation can reduce uncertainty. If you know exactly why you are the way you are, you feel defined. But healing often asks you to live beyond your explanation. You may never fully understand why one experience affected you more deeply than another. You may not know why a fear remains even after the danger is gone. You may not find one memory that explains the whole pattern. You can still practice a new response. The body learns through experience, not only through ideas. You may understand that a situation is safe and still feel anxious. The mind knows one thing while the body expects another. This does not mean your understanding is useless. It means healing needs repetition. A frightened body learns safety by meeting safety again and again. A heart that expects abandonment learns trust through consistent relationships. A mind that expects failure learns courage through small attempts. Acceptance creates the space for this practice because it stops demanding that every inner reaction disappear before life can continue. You can say, fear is present, and I can still take one step. You can say, I do not understand every part of this sadness, and I can still care for myself. You can say, the past is complicated, and I can still choose what happens today. This is a powerful shift. You stop treating understanding as the entrance ticket to life. There is another reason the ego wants complete explanation. It believes an explanation can prevent future pain. If you identify every cause, perhaps you can control every outcome. You study the past not only to understand it, but to build a perfect defense against repetition. This is natural. Pain makes the mind protective. It wants rules that guarantee safety. Never trust too quickly. Never depend on anyone. Never take a risk. Never reveal too much. Never believe good things will last. These rules may grow from understanding, but they do not create wisdom. They create a smaller life. No explanation can remove uncertainty from the future. You can become more aware, careful, and discerning, but you cannot make yourself untouchable. Love will always include risk. Trust will always include uncertainty. Change will always include loss. The goal is not to understand enough to prevent all pain. The goal is to become wise enough to meet pain without losing yourself. Buddhist practice builds this kind of strength. It does not promise a life where everything becomes clear. It teaches you to remain present when clarity is incomplete. It trains the mind to observe confusion without immediately escaping into conclusions. Sit quietly and notice what happens when you do not solve the question. The mind may become restless. It may produce possibilities. Perhaps this happened because of that. Perhaps they meant this. Perhaps the future will prove something else. The mind throws explanations into the silence because silence feels dangerous. Do not chase each thought. Let the questions rise and pass. Return to the breath. Feel the body sitting where it is. Notice the simple fact that this moment exists without a complete explanation. You are breathing without knowing everything. The world is moving without asking you to solve it. Life continues while many questions remain open. This practice slowly teaches the nervous system that uncertainty is not the same as danger. The question may still exist, but it no longer controls your attention. You learn that peace is possible in the presence of not knowing. This is different from pretending not to care. Indifference closes the heart. Acceptance keeps the heart open without forcing reality to become simpler than it is. You can care deeply and still admit that you do not know. You can love someone and not understand them completely. You can forgive parts of a story while remaining confused about others. You can make a wise decision with incomplete information. Many important decisions are made this way. You rarely know every consequence before choosing. You choose based on values, evidence, experience, and what is available now. Waiting for perfect understanding can become a reason never to act. The ego says, "I need certainty before I decide." Wisdom asks, "What choice respects reality as I see it today?" This question returns power to the present. It does not require a complete map. It asks for the next honest step. Perhaps the next step is speaking clearly. Perhaps it is listening. Perhaps it is leaving. Perhaps it is waiting. Perhaps it is seeking help. Perhaps it is admitting that you do not know. Saying, "I do not know," can be one of the most peaceful sentences in the world. It removes the pressure to invent an answer. It protects you from false certainty. It makes room for learning. It allows reality to reveal itself over time. The ego sees "I do not know" as weakness. Wisdom sees it as truth. False certainty may feel comforting, but it often creates new suffering. You decide that someone never cared, and bitterness grows. You decide that everything was your fault, and shame grows. You decide that nothing good will happen again, and fear closes your life. These conclusions fill the empty space, but they may not be true. When information is missing, the mind often chooses the explanation that matches its deepest wound. If you fear rejection, you assume you are not enough. If you fear betrayal, you assume every kindness was false. If you fear failure, you see one setback as proof that you cannot succeed. The explanation becomes a mirror of the wound, not a clear reflection of reality. Acceptance interrupts this process. It allows you to say, I do not know every reason, and I will not use the unknown to attack myself. That sentence can save years of unnecessary suffering. You do not have to fill every silence with blame. You do not have to turn every mystery into a judgment. You do not have to decide that confusion means something terrible about you. Some events remain incomplete because life moved before the answer arrived. Some people disappeared before they learned to speak honestly. Some situations changed faster than anyone could understand. Some questions will become clearer later. Others may remain open forever. Your peace does not have to wait. Acceptance is not a final feeling that appears once and stays forever. It is a practice. Some days reality feels easier to hold. Other days the old resistance returns. The mind begins bargaining again. It says, if only I understood this one part, then I could let go. Meet that thought with patience. You do not need to argue with it. Say, perhaps understanding will come, and perhaps it will not. I can still be here. Then return to what is true now. What is your body asking for? What responsibility is yours today? What boundary is clear? What kindness can you offer? What part of life is still available? These questions do not solve the entire story. They help you live. Over time, you may notice that some answers arrive only after acceptance. While you were struggling against reality, the mind was too tense to see clearly. Once you stopped forcing the explanation, patterns became easier to recognize. Distance revealed what closeness had hidden. Time showed you what urgency could not. This is one of life's quiet ironies. The more desperately you demand understanding, the harder it can become to understand. The mind selects facts that support its fear. It repeats the same ideas. It becomes unable to receive anything new. Acceptance relaxes the grip. When you stop insisting that the answer must look a certain way, a wider truth may appear. You may realize that the most important question was not why someone left, but why you believed their leaving reduced your worth. You may discover that the event was not a punishment, but a moment that exposed what needed attention. You may see that several explanations can be true at once. Still, acceptance does not depend on these insights. They are gifts, not requirements. You do not need to turn every wound into wisdom immediately. You do not need to find a hidden blessing. You do not need to produce a lesson that makes the suffering worthwhile. Sometimes acceptance is simply this: I wish I knew, but I do not. Then you breathe, you eat, you sleep, you speak to someone kind, you complete the next task, you allow one ordinary day to follow another. This may look small, but it is how life returns. The ego wants understanding to arrive as a bright light that explains everything at once. Peace often arrives more quietly. It appears when the question stops interrupting every moment. It appears when you no longer feel ashamed of not knowing. It appears when you can remember the event without immediately building another theory. The story may remain complicated, but your relationship with it becomes simple. It happened. It affected you. You learned what you could. You are still here. This is enough to begin. There may always be a part of life that remains mysterious. Human beings are mysterious even to themselves. We change, contradict ourselves, and act from motives that become clear only later. Expecting perfect explanations from imperfect minds creates endless disappointment. You can value truth without demanding total knowledge. You can seek understanding without worshipping it. You can accept reality without approving of everything in it. You can move forward while some questions remain behind you. This is not intellectual defeat. It is emotional maturity. The child inside the mind wants every painful event explained because explanations create the feeling that the world is safe. The wiser part of you knows that safety cannot come from understanding everything. It comes from trusting that you can respond with awareness, courage, and compassion even when you do not understand. That trust is deeper than certainty. It says, life may confuse me, but confusion will not destroy me. People may surprise me, but I can still protect my values. The future may be unclear, but I can meet the next moment. This is the strength Buddhist wisdom points toward. Not a mind that has solved every mystery, but a mind that no longer needs every mystery solved before it can be at peace. So let the unanswered parts remain unanswered for now. Let the unclear parts be unclear. Do not rush to create a story simply because silence makes you uncomfortable. Do not punish yourself for lacking information that was never available to you. Take what the experience has already shown. Release what cannot be known. Act on what is clear. Rest where clarity ends. Peace grows when you understand that acceptance does not need a perfect explanation. It needs honesty about what is here. The event may remain confusing. The outcome may still feel unfair. The story may never become complete. Yet your life does not have to remain unfinished because of it. And when the need to understand finally loosens, the ego often finds another respectable way to hold on. It begins calling control responsibility. It says that worry is preparation, pressure is protection, and managing every detail is simply what careful people do. This is where the next hidden attachment begins. And once you accept that life does not need to explain every mystery, another hidden struggle begins to reveal itself. The ego may stop demanding answers, yet it still tries to control what happens next. It calls this responsibility. It says it is only being careful, prepared, disciplined, or protective. But beneath all that effort, fear may be quietly holding the wheel. Control rarely introduces itself honestly. It does not usually. Say, I am terrified of uncertainty, so I need everyone and everything to behave according to my wishes. Instead, it uses respectable words. It says, I am only planning ahead. It says, I am doing this because I care. It says, someone has to keep everything together. It says, if I do not manage this, everything will fall apart. Because these statements can contain some truth, emotional control becomes difficult to recognize. Planning is useful, discipline is valuable, preparation can prevent unnecessary problems. Protecting people you love is natural, responsibility is part of a mature life. The problem begins when these healthy actions are no longer guided by wisdom, but by fear. Healthy responsibility responds to reality. Emotional control tries to force reality to obey. A responsible person prepares for what can reasonably be expected. A controlling person tries to remove every possibility of surprise. A responsible person offers guidance. A controlling person cannot rest unless others follow it. A responsible person makes a plan and adjusts when conditions change. A controlling person experiences every change as a threat. From the outside, both people may look organized. The difference is found inside the mind. Ask what happens emotionally when the plan is interrupted. Can you pause, reconsider, and choose another path? Or do you become angry, anxious, impatient, or personally offended? Can someone disagree with you without making you feel unsafe? Can another person choose differently without causing you to chase, pressure, punish, or withdraw? Your reaction often reveals whether you were practicing responsibility or seeking control. A plan is only a tool. Emotional control turns the plan into a demand. This may happen in small, ordinary moments. You decide how the day should unfold. You expect a person to arrive at a certain time, respond in a particular way, or complete a task according to your method. When something changes, the discomfort feels larger than the situation itself. The late arrival is not merely inconvenient, it feels disrespectful. The changed decision is not merely unexpected, it feels like betrayal. The different method is not simply another way. It feels wrong. The ego takes an uncertain situation and makes it personal. It interprets what it cannot control as a challenge to its importance, intelligence, or safety. This is why some people become unusually tense when others do not follow their advice. They believe they are protecting the person. They may truly care. Yet beneath that care lies a hidden belief. I will feel calm only when you make the choice I consider safe. That is not only concern, it is an attempt to regulate your own fear through someone else's behavior. Parents often experience this with adult children. A parent sees a risk and immediately wants to prevent it. They offer advice, repeat warnings, ask endless questions, and try to shape the outcome. They may call it love, and love is certainly present. But love has become mixed with fear. The parent is not only trying to protect the child, the parent is trying to protect themselves from the pain of watching the child make an uncertain choice. This difference matters. Guidance says, "Here is what I see. I trust you to consider it." Control says, "You must choose what I believe is right so that I can feel safe." Guidance leaves room for another person's mind. Control tries to replace it. Buddhist wisdom teaches that every person lives through the consequences of their own intentions and actions. You can support another person, warn them, teach them, and stand beside them. But you cannot live their life for them. You cannot remove every difficult lesson. You cannot make wisdom enter their mind before they are ready to receive it. Trying to control another person's path often creates suffering for both of you. They feel watched, doubted, or suffocated. You feel exhausted because their life refuses to remain inside your plan. The more you push, the more they may resist. Their resistance then convinces you that even greater control is necessary. A cycle begins. You become more forceful because they are pulling away. They pull away because you are becoming more forceful. Both people may believe the other is creating the problem. Control also hides inside helpfulness. You may do everything for everyone because you believe you are the most capable person in the room. You solve problems before anyone asks. You take over tasks because you do not trust others to complete them properly. You carry responsibilities that do not belong to you, then become resentful that no one helps. This pattern can look like generosity, but it may contain a need to remain necessary. Being needed can create a sense of security. If everyone depends on you, perhaps they will not leave. If you are the person who fixes every problem, perhaps your place in their lives will feel guaranteed. If you carry everything, perhaps nothing unexpected will happen. Yet the cost is heavy. You become tired but cannot release the task. You complain about carrying too much, but reject help because it may not be done your way. You want others to become responsible, but do not give them enough space to practice responsibility. You rescue them from the consequences that might have taught them. Then you feel alone inside a role you helped create. True responsibility includes knowing what is not yours to carry. This is difficult because the ego often receives praise for over-functioning. People call you reliable, strong, selfless, disciplined, or organized. They may depend on your constant effort. The praise makes it harder to see the fear underneath. You may not notice that you cannot rest without feeling guilty. You may not see that another person's mistake feels like your failure. You may not recognize how often you say, "It is easier if I do it myself." Sometimes doing everything yourself is not strength. It is a refusal to tolerate the discomfort of trust. Trust does not mean believing that others will always perform perfectly. It means allowing them to participate even when their method differs from yours. It means accepting that they may make mistakes, learn slowly, or choose a solution you would not have chosen. Control wants a guaranteed result. Trust allows a living process. This applies not only to relationships, but also to work. A person may describe themselves as disciplined while being unable to stop. Every task must be completed perfectly. Every possible error must be predicted. Every detail must be checked repeatedly. They believe this pressure proves they care. But discipline should make life clearer, not turn every action into a test of worth. Healthy discipline creates structure that supports what matters. Emotional control creates rules that punish you whenever reality is imperfect. You may set a schedule, then feel ashamed if exhaustion changes it. You may create a goal, then treat any delay as evidence of failure. You may believe that missing one routine means everything is collapsing. The activity is no longer serving your life. Your life is serving the activity. The ego becomes attached not only to achieving the goal, but to achieving it in the exact way it planned. A different path feels unacceptable, even if it leads somewhere useful. This is why flexible people often recover more quickly from setbacks. They still care about the destination, but they are not emotionally chained to one route. They can respond to new information without feeling that adaptation is defeat. A rigid person may have excellent preparation, but when reality changes, all that preparation becomes a source of panic. The mind says, "This was not supposed to happen." It spends energy resisting the change instead of responding to it. Responsibility asks, "What can I do now?" Control keeps repeating, "This must not be happening." The first question creates movement. The second creates suffering. The need for control often begins long before a person recognizes it. Perhaps your early environment was unpredictable. Adults changed moods without warning. Promises were broken. Money was uncertain. Conflict appeared suddenly. You learned that danger could arrive when no one was prepared. In such a life, control may have become a form of protection. You learned to watch people closely, predict problems, organize details, and stay several steps ahead. These habits may have helped you survive emotionally. They gave you a sense of stability when stability was missing. There is no need to shame yourself for developing them. But a strategy that once protected you can later imprison you. The body may continue preparing for chaos even when the present situation is safe. You may feel responsible for noticing every change in another person's mood. You may carefully choose your words to prevent conflict. You may constantly prepare for disappointment, rejection, or loss. The mind believes vigilance will prevent pain. In reality, constant vigilance can prevent peace. You are physically present in today's room, but emotionally preparing for yesterday's danger. This is where Buddhist awareness becomes valuable. Instead of immediately obeying the urge to control, pause and observe it. Where does the urge appear in your body? Does the chest tighten? Does the breath become shallow? Do the shoulders rise? Does the mind begin producing urgent instructions? Notice the feeling before acting from it. You may discover that the situation itself is not demanding immediate control. Your fear is demanding relief. This pause creates choice. Without awareness, fear moves directly into behavior. You check, correct, pressure, warn, or interfere. With awareness, you can say, "Fear is present, but I do not have to make fear the leader." Then ask a simple question. What belongs to me in this moment? Perhaps your responsibility is to communicate clearly. Perhaps it is to prepare a reasonable backup plan. Perhaps it is to ask for help. Perhaps it is to set a boundary. Perhaps it is to do nothing and allow another person to handle the situation. Control wants to manage everything connected to the problem. Wisdom identifies the small part that is truly yours. This distinction can change your life. Suppose you have an important interview. Responsibility means preparing, learning about the role, arriving on time, and answering honestly. Control tries to guarantee that the interviewer likes you, understands you perfectly, and chooses you. You control your preparation. You do not control their opinion. Suppose you are caring for your health. Responsibility means seeking appropriate advice, following reasonable treatment, resting, and paying attention to symptoms. Control demands that every action produce a guaranteed result and becomes terrified when the body remains unpredictable. You can influence your health. You cannot command every process in the body. Suppose you are repairing a relationship. Responsibility means speaking honestly, listening, apologizing where needed, and changing harmful behavior. Control tries to force the other person to forgive, trust, return, or respond according to your schedule. You control the sincerity of your actions. You do not control another person's heart. Much emotional exhaustion comes from trying to control outcomes that belong partly or completely to life, other people, timing, and conditions. You may spend more energy trying to secure the result than performing the action itself. Buddhist practice returns attention to intention. What quality are you bringing to the action? Are you acting from wisdom or fear? Are you speaking to communicate or to force agreement? Are you helping to support or to create dependence? Are you preparing to respond well or trying to remove every possible discomfort? Two people can perform the same action with very different minds. One person saves money from thoughtful care. Another saves from constant fear that disaster is near. One person checks on a loved one from affection. Another checks repeatedly because they cannot tolerate not knowing. One person works carefully because the task matters. Another works compulsively because mistakes feel like personal failure. The action alone does not reveal the attachment. The inner pressure does. A useful sign is whether the behavior can stop. Can you prepare and then rest? Can you send the message and wait? Can you give advice once and allow silence? Can you complete the task without checking it 10 more times? Can you make a decision without demanding endless reassurance? When the mind cannot stop, control may be wearing the clothes of responsibility. Another sign is the belief that worry proves love. You may feel that if you stop worrying about someone, you are abandoning them. You confuse mental suffering with devotion, but worry does not always protect the person you love. Sometimes it only creates two anxious people instead of one. Care can be active without being tormented. You can make a phone call, offer support, gather information, or show up when needed. After doing what is possible, continued worry does not increase your love. It only consumes your attention. The ego may resist this because worry gives it a sense of participation. Doing nothing feels helpless, so the mind continues thinking. It believes repeated thought is a kind of action, but thinking about the same danger for 5 hours does not mean you have helped for 5 hours. At some point, responsibility ends and rumination begins. You can ask, is there a useful action available now? If the answer is yes, take it calmly. If the answer is no, your practice is to remain present without creating imaginary work. This is not easy. The urge to do something may become intense, yet sometimes restraint is the wisest form of responsibility. You may need to let a child solve a problem. You may need to allow a colleague to complete a task differently. You may need to wait for information rather than demand an immediate answer. You may need to let a relationship breathe instead of forcing a conversation. You may need to permit your body to rest rather than pushing it to satisfy a schedule. Not interfering can require more courage than taking over. Control is also closely connected to identity. You may see yourself as the responsible one, the strong one, the planner, or the person who never falls apart. This identity receives respect, but it may leave no room for your humanity. You feel unable to admit confusion because responsible people are supposed to know what to do. You avoid asking for support because strong people are supposed to manage. You hide exhaustion because dependable people do not disappoint others. Eventually, responsibility becomes a mask that you are afraid to remove. The ego whispers, "If you are not managing everything, who are you?" This question can reveal how deeply control is tied to self-worth. Perhaps you believe people value you mainly for what you provide. Rest then feels dangerous because rest does not produce usefulness. Receiving care feels uncomfortable because you are familiar only with giving it. Buddhist wisdom reminds you that your value is not created by your ability to control, organize, fix, or carry. Before every role, there is simply a human being experiencing life. You are allowed to be uncertain. You are allowed to need help. You are allowed not to know. You are allowed to disappoint an unrealistic expectation. You are allowed to let another capable person carry their own responsibility. Releasing control does not make you careless. It makes your care more honest. When care is mixed with control, resentment often follows. You do something for another person, but secretly expect a certain response. You help them and expect gratitude. You sacrifice and expect loyalty. You offer advice and expect obedience. When the response does not come, you feel used or disrespected. The problem may not be the generosity itself. It may be the invisible agreement attached to it. You gave something that appeared free, but emotionally it carried a price. Healthy generosity allows you to decide openly what you can give. If you need something in return, you communicate it. Emotional control keeps the expectation hidden, then becomes angry when the other person fails to recognize it. This is why clear boundaries are kinder than silent sacrifice. A boundary says what you can and cannot do. It does not require the other person to read your mind. You may say, "I can help today, but I cannot take over the entire task. I care about you, but I cannot make this decision for you. I am willing to listen, but I cannot be available at every hour. I will share my concern once, then respect your choice." These statements protect responsibility from turning into control. Control also appears in the way people manage emotions. You may believe you must keep everyone calm. When someone is disappointed, angry, or sad, you immediately try to fix the feeling. You explain, reassure, apologize unnecessarily, or change your decision to restore peace. This may seem compassionate, but sometimes you are not helping them process an emotion. You are trying to remove your own discomfort with their emotion. Another person's disappointment does not always mean you did something wrong. Someone can dislike your boundary while the boundary remains healthy. Someone can feel sad about your decision while the decision remains necessary. Someone can misunderstand you even after you have communicated sincerely. If you believe you are responsible for every emotion around you, you will become easy to control. Anyone can change your behavior simply by showing displeasure. Healthy responsibility asks whether your action was honest, respectful, and reasonable. It does not demand that everyone feel pleased. You cannot create a life without emotional friction. Sometimes truth disappoints. Boundaries frustrate. Change creates sadness. Growth disturbs familiar roles. Trying to keep everyone comfortable may preserve temporary calm while preventing genuine healing. There are also people who attempt to control their own emotions with force. They tell themselves they must not feel afraid, jealous, sad, or angry. They treat every uncomfortable emotion as a failure of discipline. This inner control creates division. One part of the mind feels the emotion, while another part attacks it. The person may look calm, but feel tense underneath. They have not found peace. They have only pushed the disturbance out of sight. Buddhist awareness does not demand emotional perfection. It invites honest observation. Fear can be present without becoming a command. Anger can be acknowledged without becoming cruelty. Sadness can move through the heart without becoming an identity. Emotional responsibility means choosing how you respond to a feeling. Emotional control tries to stop the feeling from existing. The first creates maturity, the second creates repression. When feelings are not allowed to exist, they often return through the body: harsh behavior, exhaustion, sudden anger, or numbness. The more strongly you try to control the inner world, the more secretly it controls you. Acceptance gives emotion room to move. You can say, "I am anxious because this matters to me. I am angry because a boundary was crossed. I am sad because something valuable has changed." Then ask what response reflects your values. The feeling gives information, but it does not make every decision. The same principle applies to uncertainty. You do not need to remove uncertainty before acting responsibly. You need to make room for it while choosing wisely. A farmer can prepare the soil, plant at the proper time, protect the young plants, and care for the field. But the farmer cannot order the rain, command the temperature, or guarantee the harvest. If the farmer refuses to act without a guarantee, nothing will be planted. If the farmer believes effort controls nature completely, every storm will feel like a personal betrayal. Wise action exists between passivity and control. You prepare fully, then release what was never yours. This release is not a single decision. The ego may reclaim the outcome many times. It may wake at night and begin planning again. It may search for more reassurance, another sign, or one more precaution. Gently return to the boundary between effort and outcome. Say, "I have done what I can for now." This sentence may feel uncomfortable at first. The controlling mind will argue that there is always something more to do. There is always another possibility to consider, another detail to check, another conversation to rehearse. Technically, it may be correct. There is almost always something more you could do, but responsibility is not measured by whether you exhausted every possible action. It is measured by whether you took wise and proportionate action. More effort is not always better effort. A person can study until the mind is too tired to think. They can train until the body is injured. They can prepare until the opportunity has passed. They can protect a relationship until there is no freedom left inside it. Excess often disguises itself as commitment. The middle path asks, what is enough? Enough preparation to act with care, enough information to make a reasonable decision, enough communication to express the truth, enough effort to honor your values. Then comes release. Without release, even good effort becomes attachment. You can practice this in daily life through small acts. Leave one harmless detail imperfect. Allow someone else to choose the route. Send a thoughtful message without rewriting it endlessly. Make a plan that includes room for change. Notice when you are asking a question for useful information and when you are asking only for reassurance. These small moments train the mind to survive without total control. At first, anxiety may rise. Do not interpret that anxiety as proof that releasing control is dangerous. It may simply be the feeling of an old habit losing authority. Stay present. Observe what actually happens. Often, the feared collapse does not come. The task is completed differently but adequately. The other person handles more than you expected. The uncertainty passes without disaster. You discover that your involvement was not the only thing holding life together. This realization can be humbling, but also freeing. You do not have to be the invisible force preventing the world from falling apart. Life was moving before your plans, and it will continue beyond them. This does not make your actions meaningless. It places them in proper proportion. Your choices matter, but they are part of a larger web of conditions. You influence life, but you do not own it. Buddhist teaching describes existence as dependent on countless causes and conditions. Nothing happens through one will alone. Every result depends on many forces meeting together. When you understand this, control begins to soften. You still act carefully, but you stop believing everything rests on you. Success no longer proves that you controlled every factor. Failure no longer means you were completely irresponsible. You begin to judge yourself by the quality of your participation rather than the perfection of the result. Did you act honestly? Did you pay attention? Did you use the information available? Did you remain willing to adjust? Did you respect yourself and others? Did you release what did not belong to you? These questions create mature responsibility. A controlling mind asks only, "Did I get the outcome I wanted?" If the answer is yes, it feels safe for a moment. If the answer is no, it becomes angry or ashamed. This creates a fragile life because peace depends on results. A responsible mind understands that wise action can still lead to an unwanted outcome. You can make a thoughtful choice and still experience loss. You can love someone well and still lose the relationship. You can work hard and still face conditions beyond your influence. This is not evidence that responsibility failed. Responsibility is not a contract guaranteeing that life will reward you. It is a way of meeting life with integrity. When you release the need to control the reward, your actions become cleaner. You help because helping reflects your values, not because it guarantees loyalty. You speak truth because truth matters, not because everyone will approve. You prepare because preparation is wise, not because it can remove uncertainty. This is freedom inside action. You remain involved, but not possessed by the outcome. You care deeply, but do not turn care into pressure. You plan carefully, but do not worship the plan. You protect what you can, but do not make fear your guide. You accept assistance because responsibility does not require isolation. You rest because rest is part of wise effort. The ego may fear that without control you will become passive, but release is not passivity. Passivity refuses to act. Release acts fully and then stops demanding ownership over everything that follows. A person crossing a river must steer the boat, watch the current, and avoid visible dangers. But they cannot freeze the water or command the wind. Wisdom uses the paddle. Control argues with the river. Much of human suffering comes from arguing with the river. We say people should not change, bodies should not age, plans should not fail. Loved ones should never disappoint us. The future should remain predictable. We call these expectations reasonable because they are emotionally important. But importance does not create control. The river continues moving. Peace begins when you stop measuring responsibility by how successfully you forced the river to follow your wishes. You measure it by how wisely you responded to the current. Some days you paddle forward. Some days you wait. Some days you change direction. Some days you ask another person to help. Some days the wisest action is returning to the shore. Flexibility is not weakness. It is intelligence that remains awake. The controlling mind may hold the same decision long after conditions have changed because changing course feels like admitting failure. A responsible mind recognizes that new reality requires a new response. You are allowed to revise a plan. You are allowed to leave a goal that no longer reflects your values. You are allowed to change your mind after learning something new. You are allowed to stop carrying a duty that was never truly yours. You are allowed to choose peace over proving that your original plan was correct. These choices do not make you unreliable. They show that your responsibility belongs to reality, not to your pride. The clearest sign of emotional control is often the absence of inner space. Everything feels urgent, every decision feels final, every mistake feels dangerous. Other people's choices feel personal, rest feels irresponsible, uncertainty feels unbearable. Healthy responsibility has space inside it. There is room to breathe before responding, room to listen, room to learn, room to allow another person's view, room to make a mistake and repair it, room to change direction, room to admit that the answer is not yet clear. That space is where wisdom enters. Without it, fear makes the decision before awareness arrives. So when you feel the urge to manage everything, do not immediately condemn yourself. Ask what fear is trying to prevent. Perhaps it fears rejection, failure, shame, loss, helplessness, or being blamed. Listen to the fear without giving it complete authority. You may tell it, "I understand that you want safety. We will prepare carefully, but we will not try to control another person. We will act wisely, but we will not punish ourselves for uncertainty. We will protect what is ours, but we will not carry the whole world." This inner response joins compassion with discipline. Gradually, responsibility becomes lighter. You still remember appointments, keep promises, prepare for important tasks, and care for those you love. But the pressure changes. You no longer believe every outcome is a judgment of your worth. When plans change, you adjust. When people choose differently, you respect the boundary between their life and yours. When uncertainty appears, you stay present. When effort is complete, you allow rest. This is how healthy responsibility feels. It is serious without being rigid, caring without becoming possessive, prepared without becoming obsessed, disciplined without becoming cruel. It does not promise that nothing will go wrong. It gives you the steadiness to respond when something does. The ego wants control because it does not trust life, other people, or its own ability to face the unknown. It believes safety comes from securing every result in advance. But deeper confidence does not say, "Everything will happen according to my plan." It says, "Whatever happens, I will meet it as wisely as I can." That confidence is quieter than control, but far stronger. Control breaks when reality refuses to obey. Inner trust bends, learns, and continues. When you recognize this, responsibility returns to its proper place. It becomes the sincere care you bring to your choices, not a weapon used against uncertainty. You stop calling anxiety preparation. You stop calling interference protection. You stop calling exhaustion discipline. You do what belongs to you, and you release what belongs to life. Yet once control begins to loosen, the ego often searches for another form of safety. If it cannot guarantee events through constant management, it begins looking outside itself for promises. It wants proof that nothing will change, that no one will leave, and that the future will unfold without danger. Certainty then becomes a substitute for something far deeper. Trust in your ability to face life as it comes. And when control begins to loosen, the ego often reaches for something that feels safer. It starts asking for guarantees. It wants proof that the relationship will last, the plan will succeed, the body will remain strong, and tomorrow will not bring another painful surprise. Yet the more certainty you demand from life, the more fragile you may become. The real question is not whether life can promise you safety. It is whether you can trust yourself when life refuses to make that promise. Certainty feels comforting because it gives the mind the sense that danger has been removed. When you know what will happen, you believe you can prepare for it. When people clearly state their intentions, you feel less exposed. When a plan is confirmed, a diagnosis is understood, or an outcome appears predictable, the body relaxes. There is nothing wrong with wanting useful information. Clear facts help you make decisions. Agreements can protect relationships. Preparation can reduce avoidable risk. The problem begins when information is no longer enough, and the mind starts demanding a guarantee that uncertainty can never return. No answer can provide that guarantee. A person can promise to stay and later change. A strong business can face an unexpected crisis. A healthy body can become ill. A carefully planned journey can meet a closed road. A peaceful season can end without warning. This does not mean life is cruel. It means life is moving. Everything that exists depends on changing conditions. People grow, circumstances shift, feelings rise and fall, and opportunities appear and disappear. Buddhist wisdom describes this as impermanence. It is not a punishment placed upon life. It is the nature of life itself. A flower blooms because conditions change. A wound heals because conditions change. A child grows because conditions change. Morning arrives because the night does not remain permanent. The same movement that takes things away also allows new things to appear. The ego usually welcomes change when it brings something desirable. It celebrates improvement, growth, healing, and success. But when change threatens what it loves, it suddenly demands permanence. It wants good conditions to continue while painful conditions disappear. Life does not divide change this way. It offers movement, not selective permanence. When the mind cannot accept this, it searches for certainty outside itself. It asks people to promise more than any person can promise. It asks plans to protect it from every surprise. It asks knowledge to remove every risk. It asks spiritual practice to guarantee that suffering will never return. Beneath these demands is often a lack of inner trust. The mind is not only afraid that something difficult may happen, it is afraid that if it happens, you will not be able to bear it. This is the deeper fear. You may say, "I need to know whether this relationship will work," but beneath that question may be another thought. "If it ends, I will not survive the pain." You may say, "I need to know whether I will succeed," while secretly believing, "If I fail, I will lose my worth." You may say, "I need to know that everyone I love is safe," while fearing, "If something changes, I will fall apart." Certainty then becomes a substitute for confidence. Instead of trusting your ability to respond, you try to make sure no response will ever be required. This creates a difficult way of living because life does not cooperate with that demand. You may receive reassurance, but the relief does not last. Soon, the mind produces another possibility. What if they change their mind? What if the test was wrong? What if something happens later? What if I missed an important detail? The ego asks for certainty, receives an answer, and then questions the answer. This reveals that the real problem was not the lack of information. It was the inability to feel safe without complete control over the future. Reassurance can calm fear for a moment, but repeated reassurance may teach the mind that fear must always be answered before it can settle. Instead of building confidence, you build dependence. You may begin checking messages repeatedly, asking the same questions in different ways, searching for more opinions or studying every sign. Each action gives brief relief. Then uncertainty returns, and the cycle begins again. This can happen in relationships. Someone tells you they care, but you continue searching for proof. You analyze their tone, response time, facial expressions, and small changes in behavior. A quiet day becomes evidence of distance. A delayed reply becomes a warning. The mind is not simply observing reality, it is testing reality every hour to see whether safety still exists. But relationships cannot breathe under constant examination. Trust is not the ability to prove that another person will never disappoint you. No human being can offer that certainty. Trust is the willingness to relate to what is present while remaining awake to what is true. It includes discernment. You observe patterns, communicate clearly, and protect your boundaries. But you do not force every ordinary moment to answer the question, "Am I completely safe?" No relationship can survive that responsibility. The other person becomes responsible not only for loving you, but for constantly calming every fear your mind creates. Even sincere reassurance will eventually feel insufficient because the wound asking for certainty is inside you. This does not mean all doubt is irrational. Sometimes doubt is useful. A person may be inconsistent, dishonest, or emotionally unavailable. Your discomfort may be showing you something important. Inner trust does not mean ignoring evidence. It means trusting yourself to see evidence clearly and respond when needed. There is a major difference between saying, "I know this person will never hurt me," and saying, "I trust myself not to abandon my dignity if harmful behavior appears." The first statement depends on another person remaining predictable. The second depends on your own awareness and courage. One is certainty, the other is inner trust. Certainty says, "Nothing difficult will happen." Inner trust says, "If something difficult happens, I will not face it blindly." This deeper confidence does not make you fearless. It changes what fear means. Fear becomes a signal to examine, not a command to obey. You can feel afraid and still remember that you have choices. Perhaps you can speak. Perhaps you can leave. Perhaps you can seek support. Perhaps you can wait until you know more. Perhaps you can grieve without being destroyed. When you remember that you have responses available, uncertainty becomes less threatening. The ego often forgets your history of surviving. It remembers the pain, but not the strength that carried you through it. It remembers the night you thought would never end, but not the morning that eventually came. It remembers how helpless you felt, but not the decisions you later made. You have already faced uncertainty many times. There were days when you did not know how a problem would be solved. There were conversations whose outcomes you could not predict. There were losses you once believed would permanently break you. There were moments when you moved forward without a complete map. You may not have moved perfectly. You may have cried, made mistakes, asked for help, or needed time. But you moved. Inner trust is built by remembering this honestly. It does not say, "I handled everything without struggle." It says, "Even while struggling, I found a way to continue." The ego may reject this because it wants strength to mean never feeling shaken. But a tree is not strong because the wind never moves it. It is strong because it can bend without losing its roots. Human strength works in the same way. You may bend under grief. You may pause under confusion. You may need support during change. None of this proves that you cannot meet life. The need for certainty often creates a false picture of strength. You think a strong person knows exactly what to do, never doubts, and always feels calm. Real strength is often quieter. It is the ability to remain present when you do not know what to do yet. It is the willingness to admit, "I am afraid, but I am listening. I do not know, but I am paying attention. This is painful, but I am not abandoning myself." Buddhist practice develops this kind of steadiness through direct experience. When you sit with the breath, you notice that even breathing is uncertain. You cannot hold one breath forever. Each inhale must become an exhale. Each exhale creates space for another inhale. The body survives through release. If you tried to keep only the inhale because it felt like gaining life, you would suffer. Life continues because receiving and releasing work together. This simple rhythm reflects a larger truth. You cannot keep every person, role, feeling, or condition exactly as it is. Trying to hold life without change is like trying to inhale without ever breathing out. The fear of release comes from believing that emptiness will remain empty forever, but the empty lungs receive another breath. The ending of one condition makes room for another condition to arise. This does not mean every loss is quickly replaced. Some absences remain meaningful for a lifetime. Inner trust does not erase grief. It allows you to grieve without deciding that life has ended because one form of life has changed. There is a part of you deeper than any single circumstance. Roles change. You may be a student, worker, partner, parent, caregiver, or leader. These roles matter, but none of them contains your entire being. When one role changes, the ego may feel as though identity itself is disappearing. You may ask, who am I if this relationship ends? Who am I if I can no longer do this work? Who am I if my body changes? These questions reveal how much security was placed outside you. Inner trust grows when you learn to meet yourself beneath the role. You notice the awareness that has been present through many changes. The child you were is gone. The life you lived 10 years ago has changed. Your beliefs, body, relationships, and responsibilities may be different. Yet something in you has witnessed every season. Buddhist teaching does not describe this witness as a fixed and permanent self that never changes. It invites you to see that what you call me is also made of changing experiences, memories, sensations, and conditions. This can initially feel unsettling. The ego wants a solid identity to hold. But there is freedom in not having to protect one fixed version of yourself forever. You are allowed to become different. You are allowed to release an old identity. You are allowed to discover strengths that were not needed before. You are allowed to meet a new season without already knowing who you will be inside it. Certainty wants your future self completely defined in advance. Inner trust gives your future self room to emerge. This matters when making decisions. Many people delay important choices because they want certainty that the choice will lead to the best outcome. They want to know they will not regret it. They want proof that another path would not have been better. Such proof is rarely available. Every meaningful choice closes some possibilities and opens others. You decide using the information, values, and awareness you have now. Later, new information may appear. That does not always mean the original decision was foolish. Inner trust allows you to make a sincere choice without pretending you can see the entire future. You ask, what is most honest now? What choice reflects my values? What risk can I reasonably accept? What information is actually available? Then you act. After acting, you remain willing to learn. If conditions change, you respond again. This is very different from trying to make one perfect decision that protects you forever. Life is not a test with one hidden correct answer. It is a living process requiring continuous attention. The ego wants certainty because it sees mistakes as disasters. Inner trust sees mistakes as information. This does not mean being careless or celebrating harmful choices. It means understanding that some wisdom can only be gained through experience. You cannot learn trust without risking disappointment. You cannot learn courage without meeting fear. You cannot learn flexibility if every plan succeeds. You cannot discover your ability to recover if nothing ever changes. This does not mean you should seek suffering. It means difficult experiences may reveal capacities that certainty would never allow you to discover. A person who waits until failure is impossible may never begin. A person who waits until rejection is impossible may never love openly. A person who waits until every danger is removed may never leave the familiar. Certainty promises safety, but it may quietly steal aliveness. You begin reducing your life to what can be predicted. You avoid new relationships, opportunities, journeys, or ideas because they contain risk. The world becomes smaller, not because every danger is real, but because uncertainty itself has been declared unacceptable. The ego calls this wisdom. It says, "I am protecting myself." But protection that prevents all growth becomes another form of harm. A seed protected forever inside a container will never face wind or rain. It will also never become a tree. Inner trust does not remove reasonable protection. It creates balance. You do not expose yourself blindly. You learn, prepare, observe, and set limits. Then you accept that complete safety is not available. You choose a living life instead of a perfectly defended one. This trust can be practiced in small moments. You do not need to begin with your deepest fear. Begin by noticing ordinary uncertainty. Send a message without checking it repeatedly. Allow a conversation to unfold without preparing every response. Try a different routine without needing proof that it will be better. Let someone else make a harmless decision. Spend a quiet hour without filling it with predictions. Notice what the mind says. It may warn that something will go wrong. It may demand reassurance. It may create an urgent need to regain control. Do not immediately obey. Feel the uncertainty in the body. Breathe with it. Observe how it rises, changes, and eventually softens. This teaches you something important. Discomfort is not permanent. You do not need certainty to make discomfort disappear instantly. You can stay present long enough for the nervous system to learn that uncertainty can be felt without becoming danger. Each time you do this, inner trust grows. Trust is not built only through positive thinking. It is built through experiences in which you remain with yourself. You make a mistake and respond with kindness. You face disappointment and do not destroy your worth. You feel fear and still take a wise step. You teach yourself, "I will not abandon you when life becomes difficult." This may be one of the deepest forms of confidence. Many people trust themselves only when they are performing well. When they succeed, they feel worthy. When they know what to do, they feel secure. But when confusion or failure comes, they attack themselves. This is conditional self-trust. It says, "I will support you as long as you do not embarrass me, fail, struggle, or need too much." A frightened mind cannot find safety inside such conditions. It searches outside for certainty because inside it expects punishment. Unconditional inner support sounds different. It says, "I want to act wisely, but I will not become cruel to myself when I am imperfect. If I make a mistake, I will repair what I can. If I become confused, I will slow down. If I need help, I will ask. If I lose something, I will allow myself to grieve." This does not lower your standards. It creates the emotional safety needed to meet your standards honestly. A person who fears self-punishment may avoid truth. They hide mistakes, delay decisions, and seek constant approval because being wrong feels unbearable. A person with inner trust can face uncomfortable truth more directly. They know that admitting a mistake will not destroy their relationship with themselves. This is one reason Buddhist compassion is not weakness. Compassion allows awareness to remain open. Harshness makes the mind defensive. When you can observe your own fear without condemnation, you are more likely to understand it clearly. Ask the fear what it believes uncertainty means. Perhaps it means abandonment. Perhaps it means humiliation. Perhaps it means poverty. Perhaps it means loss of control. Perhaps it means being alone with pain. Do not rush to argue with the answer. Listen, then ask whether the fear is describing a possibility or declaring a certainty of its own. Fear often says, "This could happen," and quickly turns it into, "This will happen, and I will not survive it." Separate the two claims. Yes, change is possible. No, the worst outcome is not guaranteed. Yes, pain may come. No, pain does not erase every resource available to you. Yes, you may need support. Needing support is not the same as being helpless. Inner trust is realistic. It does not replace negative certainty with positive certainty. It does not say, everything will definitely work out exactly as I want. That is only another attempt to control the future through belief. Instead, it says, I do not know exactly how this will unfold. I will meet what is real when it arrives. This sentence contains both humility and strength. It does not deny danger. It refuses to suffer every imagined danger in advance. Much anxiety comes from living through possible futures before any of them have happened. The mind creates scenes of rejection, illness, failure, loneliness, or loss. The body reacts as though each scene is already real. You may experience 10 disasters in thought before breakfast, while the present morning remains quiet. The ego believes this rehearsal will prepare you. Sometimes practical rehearsal is useful. You may consider possible challenges and make a response plan. But emotional rehearsal often continues far beyond usefulness. You do not become more prepared. You become more exhausted. Inner trust knows when preparation is complete. It says, I have considered what I reasonably can. Now I will return to the present. Returning to the present is not denial. The present is the only place where a useful response can occur. You cannot act inside tomorrow's imagined crisis. You can only take today's wise action. Perhaps that action is saving money, booking an appointment, having a conversation, learning a skill, or creating a backup plan. Once the action is taken, continued fear does not add protection. The mind may object, but what if I stop worrying and something happens? This question reveals a hidden superstition, the belief that worry keeps danger away, as though relaxing might invite disaster, or constant fear proves you are alert enough to prevent it. Worry does not control reality. You can care without remaining tense. You can prepare without living in alarm. You can love without constantly predicting loss. In fact, constant fear may prevent you from fully receiving what is here. You are so worried about losing the person that you do not enjoy their presence. You are so afraid of failure that you cannot experience the work itself. You are so concerned about aging that you miss the life your current body still allows. The demand for future certainty steals present intimacy. Buddhist mindfulness gently interrupts this theft. It asks you to notice what is actually here, not what may disappear tomorrow, not what might go wrong next month. What is here now? Perhaps someone you love is sitting beside you. Listen to them. Perhaps your body is able to walk today. Feel the ground. Perhaps the work is difficult but meaningful. Give attention to the next task. Perhaps uncertainty remains. Let it remain at the edge of awareness without allowing it to consume the center. Inner trust does not require uncertainty to vanish. It allows uncertainty and presence to exist together. This is a mature confidence because it is not built on outcomes. It is built on relationship, your relationship with your own awareness, values, and capacity to respond. You may lose confidence in a plan and still trust yourself. You may stop trusting a person and still trust your judgment. You may not trust a situation and still trust your ability to leave it. You may not trust that life will be easy, but trust that you can ask for help when it is not. This prevents the common mistake of confusing self-trust with trusting every feeling. Not every feeling is accurate. Fear can exaggerate. Desire can overlook danger. Anger can simplify complex events. Self-trust does not mean everything I think is true. It means I can examine my thoughts honestly. I can listen to evidence. I can change my mind. I can seek wise guidance. I can correct my direction. A rigid person may appear confident because they never question themselves. But inner trust is flexible. It does not need to defend every old belief. It knows that learning is not humiliation. You can trust yourself enough to say, I was wrong. You can trust yourself enough to admit, I do not know. You can trust yourself enough to leave a certainty that no longer matches reality. False certainty often survives because the ego would rather feel correct than remain open. It creates firm opinions about people, the future, and even itself. This person will never change. I always ruin good things. No one can be trusted. My best years are gone. These statements feel solid. They remove uncertainty by turning fear into identity or prophecy. But a painful certainty is still attractive to the ego because at least it feels known. It may prefer a guaranteed negative future to an open future that cannot be controlled. Buddhist practice asks you to loosen your grip even on these conclusions. Perhaps the person will not change, but you do not need to build your life around watching them. Perhaps you have made repeated mistakes, but repetition is not destiny. Perhaps some people broke trust, but that does not reveal every human heart. Perhaps a season has ended, but you cannot know every form of meaning still ahead. You do not replace these thoughts with empty promises. You simply stop pretending that fear can see the whole future. This creates room for new evidence, room for different choices, room for help, room for surprise, room for a life larger than your current prediction. Inner trust is often strengthened through community. Trusting yourself does not mean handling everything alone. That belief may be another form of control. You may think asking for help proves weakness because it makes you dependent on uncertain people, but wise dependence is part of human life. No one becomes strong without support. Teachers, friends, family members, doctors, counselors, and communities may all help us see what fear hides. Receiving support does not reduce inner trust when you choose support consciously. It can deepen it. You trust yourself enough to recognize your limits. You trust yourself enough to seek a better perspective. You trust yourself enough not to confuse isolation with strength. At the same time, no outside person can become the permanent source of your security. A teacher can guide you but cannot live your practice. A loved one can comfort you, but cannot remove every fear. A professional can offer knowledge, but cannot guarantee all outcomes. Support is valuable when it helps you stand more honestly inside your own life. It becomes unhealthy when you believe you cannot make any decision, feel any emotion, or face any difficulty without someone else first giving permission. The goal is not independence from everyone. It is freedom from the belief that another person must guarantee your future before you can live. This freedom grows through keeping small promises to yourself. When you say you will rest, rest. When you decide to set a boundary, honor it. When you make a mistake, return and repair. When you notice harmful behavior, do not explain it away merely because you fear change. Every time you act in alignment with what you know, you create evidence that you can rely on yourself. Inner trust is not a feeling you wait to receive. It is built through repeated acts of self-respect. You may still feel uncertain while performing them. Confidence often arrives after action, not before it. You speak even though your voice shakes. You leave even though part of you wants familiar pain. You begin even though success is not promised. You rest even though the mind calls you lazy. You ask for help even though pride feels exposed. These moments teach the ego that uncertainty does not remove your power. Eventually, something shifts. You still prefer good outcomes, but you no longer demand them as the price of peace. You still hope people remain, plans succeed, and efforts bear fruit. But hope becomes softer. It does not hold life by the throat. You begin to say, I hope this works, and I will meet the truth if it does not. I love this person, and I will not disappear from myself to keep them. I care about this future, and I will not sacrifice the present to guarantee it. This is not emotional distance. It is love without the demand for ownership. Certainty often wants to own the future before it arrives. Inner trust allows the future to arrive as it is. The ego may ask, how can I relax when nothing is guaranteed? Buddhist wisdom replies with another question, when was anything ever guaranteed? The guarantee you believed you had was often only an idea. Life was always changing. People were always free to choose. The body was always temporary. Plans were always dependent on conditions. Yet you lived. You laughed during uncertain years. You loved people whose futures you could not know. You began things without seeing their endings. You slept each night without a promise that tomorrow would follow your plan. Uncertainty was always present. The difference is whether you treated it as an enemy. When you stop fighting uncertainty, you do not become careless. You stop wasting strength on an unwinnable battle. That strength becomes available for attention, courage, kindness, and wise action. You stop asking life to prove that nothing will change. You begin asking how to meet change without losing compassion. You stop demanding that no one disappoint you. You begin trusting yourself to recognize and respond to disappointment. You stop needing the path to be visible for miles. You learn to take the next honest step. This is the confidence Buddhist practice develops. Not confidence in permanent conditions, but confidence in awareness. Not faith that pain will never come, but faith that pain can be met without creating endless additional suffering. You may not control the first wound, but you can learn not to feed it with shame, resistance, and fearful stories. You may not choose every ending, but you can choose not to turn every ending into proof that life is against you. You may not know what comes next, but you can meet the next moment before trying to live the entire future. Inner trust grows when you understand that you do not need to be ready for every possible event. You need to be present for the event that is actually happening. This removes an impossible burden. No one can prepare emotionally for every loss, conflict, change, or challenge. You will sometimes be surprised. You may sometimes feel unprepared. Being unprepared does not mean being incapable. You can learn while responding. You can become stronger during the season, not only before it. You can find help you did not know you would need. You can discover choices that were invisible from a distance. The ego wants the complete map before beginning. Life often reveals the path one section at a time. A traveler walking at night may see only a small distance ahead, but that light can be enough. They do not need the whole road illuminated at once. They need enough clarity for the next few steps. Your life may work the same way. You may not know where the relationship will lead, but you can notice whether honesty is present today. You may not know how your career will unfold, but you can build one useful skill now. You may not know how long healing will take, but you can care for your body this morning. You may not know how grief will change you, but you can allow one breath without resisting it. This is how trust becomes practical. It is not a grand belief repeated from a distance. It is the willingness to meet the small reality in front of you. Over time, the mind stops asking, "Can I guarantee that life will not hurt me?" It begins asking, "Can I remain kind, aware, and honest when life changes?" This is a better question because it points toward what can actually be practiced. You can practice awareness, you can practice patience, you can practice asking for help, you can practice releasing what cannot be held, you can practice returning after fear pulls you away. No practice makes you perfect, but each practice makes you less dependent on certainty. One day you may notice that the future remains unclear, yet your body is not fighting it in the same way. You do not need every answer immediately. You can let a decision develop. You can allow another person's feelings to unfold. You can wait without filling the silence with disaster. This quietness is not emptiness. It is trust. The ego expected confidence to feel like knowing exactly what would happen. Instead, confidence begins to feel like not needing to know. It feels like standing inside change without demanding that change introduce itself first. It feels like loving without asking for a contract with time. It feels like acting sincerely without requiring the world to reward you. It feels like losing a familiar path without deciding that all paths are gone. Certainty may still be pleasant when it appears. There is no need to reject clarity, stability, or reliable plans. The lesson is not to worship uncertainty or avoid making commitments. The lesson is to stop making certainty the foundation of peace. A foundation built on certainty will crack whenever conditions change. A foundation built on inner trust can remain steady even while the structure of life is being rearranged. You do not know everything. You cannot control everything. You will not keep everything. Yet you can meet life. You can pause before reacting. You can see what is true. You can choose your next response. You can repair when you fail. You can receive support. You can begin again. This is enough. The ego searches outside itself for guarantees because it has forgotten this strength. It looks for promises, predictions, and proof. It asks the future to become harmless before it will enter. Buddhist wisdom turns you gently inward. It reminds you that peace does not come from knowing the storm will never arrive. It comes from learning that you can remain present when the sky changes. You do not need certainty that everything will go as planned. You need trust that when the plan changes, you will listen, you will breathe, you will adjust, you will act where action is possible, you will release where control is impossible, and you will not abandon yourself simply because life became unfamiliar. Once this inner trust begins to grow, the ego loses one of its strongest hiding places. Yet it may still try to escape uncertainty by living ahead of time. It starts rehearsing tomorrow, predicting conversations, preparing for disasters, and building entire futures inside the mind. What appears to be careful thinking may become another way of avoiding the only life that is truly here, the present moment. Once inner trust begins to grow, the ego loses its strongest excuse for demanding guarantees, yet it does not disappear. It simply moves forward in time. It begins rehearsing tomorrow, predicting every response, preparing for disasters, and building conversations that have not happened. It calls this intelligence, but something painful is hidden beneath it. The mind is leaving the present because the present cannot promise what comes next. You may be sitting in a quiet room while your thoughts are already living inside tomorrow's problems. Nothing is happening around you, yet your body is tense. Your heart is reacting to words no one has spoken. Your mind is defending itself against accusations no one has made. You are experiencing a future that exists only in thought, but the fear inside your body feels completely real. This is one of the ego's most convincing habits. It makes mental rehearsal feel like preparation. It tells you that if you predict every possible outcome, nothing will surprise you. If you plan every answer, no one will embarrass you. If you think through every danger, pain will not catch you unprepared. But there is a difference between preparing for a situation and repeatedly living through it before it arrives. Healthy preparation has a clear purpose. You gather useful information, decide what action is needed, and then return to your life. Mental rehearsal has no natural ending. Each answer creates another question. Each solution reveals another possible problem. The mind keeps moving because it is not truly trying to prepare. It is trying to remove uncertainty. You may rehearse a difficult conversation for hours. You choose the exact words you will use. Then you predict how the other person may respond. You build your answer to their answer. You imagine them becoming angry, defensive, cold, or dismissive. You prepare several versions of yourself for several versions of them. By the time the real conversation arrives, you are no longer meeting the person in front of you. You are meeting all the people your fear created. They may speak gently, but you are ready for attack. They may ask an honest question, but you hear hidden judgment. They may pause to think, but you interpret the silence as rejection. Your mind prepared so strongly for danger that it can no longer recognize a different reality. The rehearsal that was meant to protect you may create the very tension you feared. You enter the conversation with a guarded voice, a fixed story, and an answer already prepared. The other person feels your defensiveness and becomes defensive themselves. What began as an imagined conflict slowly becomes a real one. This is how the ego can mistake prediction for perception. It thinks it is seeing what will happen, but it may be shaping what happens through the fear it carries into the moment. The future rehearsal often begins with the phrase, "What if?" What if they misunderstand me? What if I fail? What if the pain returns? What if I lose what I have built? What if I make the wrong decision? These questions are not always harmful. A practical "what if?" can help you consider a risk and prepare a reasonable response. But when the same question is repeated without leading to action, it becomes a doorway out of the present. The mind does not ask, "What can I wisely do?" It asks, "How many painful futures can I create before I feel safe?" Safety never arrives because every future contains another unknown. You may solve one imagined problem, but the mind creates another. If the first plan succeeds, what if something happens afterward? If one person supports you, what if another person does not? If today is peaceful, what if tomorrow changes? The future is endless, so a mind searching there for complete security will never finish its work. Buddhist wisdom does not tell you to ignore the future. Actions have consequences, and wise people consider them. Farmers prepare for seasons. Travelers consider the road. Families make plans. Communities protect themselves from foreseeable danger. The teaching is not against preparation. It is against living in a time that has not arrived while abandoning the moment that has. You know preparation has become avoidance when thinking no longer improves your response. It only increases your tension. You know it has become avoidance when you cannot stop after making a reasonable plan. You know it has become avoidance when imagined events affect your mood more strongly than present facts. You know it has become avoidance when the future receives your full attention while the person, task, or life in front of you receives what remains. The ego often prefers the future because the future can be controlled inside thought. In the mind, you can pause the conversation, rewrite your answer, change the ending, and repeat the scene. Real life is less obedient. People interrupt. Emotions appear. Unexpected information changes the situation. The imagined future gives you the feeling of control without requiring you to face the uncertainty of actual experience. This is why a person may spend months thinking about beginning something while never beginning. They research every possibility, plan every stage, study every risk, and predict every failure. It looks like commitment, but the planning protects them from the vulnerability of action. As long as the project remains in the future, it cannot truly fail. As long as the conversation remains rehearsed, no one can truly reject you. As long as the decision remains under analysis, you do not have to face its consequences. The future becomes a waiting room where the ego delays living. You may tell yourself that you will act when you feel ready, but readiness can become another perfect condition that never arrives. The mind keeps rehearsing because rehearsal feels safer than participation. Participation requires you to be seen. It allows mistakes. It exposes limits. It invites responses you cannot control. The ego would rather perfect a life in thought than live an imperfect life in reality. This is not laziness. Often it is fear wearing the appearance of seriousness. The person may be mentally exhausted because they have been working inside their thoughts all day, yet nothing in the outer world has changed. They have fought arguments, survived disasters, defended decisions, and prepared explanations. The body has carried the stress of many events that never occurred. This has a real cost. The nervous system does not always separate a vividly imagined danger from an immediate one. When the mind repeatedly creates a threatening future, the body may tighten, the breath may shorten, and rest may become difficult. You may feel tired without understanding why. You have not been resting in the present. You have been traveling through possible emergencies. The ego believes that expecting pain will make pain hurt less. It tells you that surprise is the real danger. If you can see disappointment coming, perhaps you will remain in control. But expecting pain does not remove its impact. It often makes you suffer twice, once before anything happens, and again if it actually does. Sometimes the feared event never occurs, which means all the earlier suffering was created entirely by thought. Yet the mind rarely pauses to notice this. It quickly moves to another prediction. It says, "It did not happen this time, but that does not mean it will not happen next time." The prediction protects itself from being disproved. This is how fear can become a permanent advisor. The mind may also believe that negative prediction prevents disappointment. You lower your hopes, expect rejection, and prepare for failure. If the outcome is painful, you can say, "I knew it." This gives the ego a small feeling of victory. But being correct about pain is not the same as being free from it. The desire to say, "I knew this would happen," may cost you the ability to receive anything good before the outcome is known. You do not enjoy the relationship because you are studying signs of its ending. You do not celebrate progress because you are preparing for reversal. You do not rest during peace because you are waiting for the next problem. You turn every beautiful moment into evidence that something valuable may soon be lost. The fear is understandable. When life has surprised you painfully before, the mind may decide never to be surprised again. It becomes watchful. It studies small changes. It tries to detect danger earlier than it did last time. This may have once helped you survive a difficult environment. If people around you were unpredictable, noticing changes in tone, mood, or behavior may have protected you. You learn to think ahead because the present did not feel secure. But the same habit can continue long after the environment changes. You may now be surrounded by safer people, yet your mind is still rehearsing old dangers. A quiet expression feels like the beginning of anger. A delayed message feels like abandonment. A small mistake feels like a future disaster. The present person becomes covered by the shadow of someone from the past. Buddhist awareness invites you to separate memory from immediate reality. Ask, "What is happening now before I add my prediction?" This question is simple, but powerful. Perhaps what is happening now is only that someone has not replied. The mind adds, "They are losing interest." Perhaps what is happening now is that your manager wants to speak with you. The mind adds, "I am about to lose everything." Perhaps what is happening now is that your body feels unusual. The mind adds, "Something terrible is beginning." Facts are often small. Predictions make them enormous. This does not mean dismissing genuine warning signs. It means learning to see the difference between observation and interpretation. Observation says, "Their behavior has changed consistently over several weeks." Prediction says, "This one quiet afternoon means the relationship is ending." Observation says, "I have an important deadline and need a plan." Prediction says, if I make one mistake, my entire future will collapse. Observation keeps you in contact with reality. Prediction may pull you into a story. One helpful practice is to divide what you know from what you fear. What facts are available right now? What part has been added by the mind? What useful action can be taken today? Suppose you are worried about a future conversation. The facts may be that a difficult issue needs to be discussed. Your fear may be that the other person will reject, insult, or leave you. The useful action may be preparing 2 or 3 clear points and choosing an appropriate time to speak. After that, continuing to rehearse every possible reaction does not create more wisdom. It creates more suffering. You do not need to predict every response. You need to remain present enough to hear the response that actually comes. This is where inner trust from the previous lesson becomes essential. The mind rehearses the future because it does not believe you can think, feel, and respond in real time. It assumes that unless every answer is prepared, you will become helpless. But you have the ability to listen. You can pause. You can say, I need a moment to think. You can ask a question. You can end a conversation that becomes harmful. You can return to the issue later. You do not need to know every word in advance because you will still be present when the moment arrives. This trust releases a great burden. You stop trying to send a future version of yourself instructions for every possible event. You allow that future self to receive the reality that will be available then. The person you are tomorrow may know something you do not know today. They may have more information, support, strength, or clarity. Rehearsing everything now assumes that your current fear is wiser than your future awareness. Sometimes, the most responsible thing you can do for your future self is to leave them room to respond. The ego also rehearses other people's reactions because it wants to manage how it will be seen. You may prepare explanations for choices no one has questioned. You imagine criticism and build a defense. You predict disappointment and prepare to justify yourself. This can happen even when no one has asked for an explanation. The audience exists only in your mind, yet you're already standing before it. You may spend an entire evening defending a decision to people who are not present. You explain your needs, your boundaries, your failures, and your hopes. The imagined audience argues back. You make another defense. The deeper fear may be that your own approval is not enough. You need to prove that your choice is reasonable before you feel permitted to make it. This turns the future into a courtroom. Every decision must be defended. Every change must be explained. Every boundary must survive an imagined trial. The ego says this preparation will make you stronger, but it may reveal that your inner authority is weak. You do not yet trust that a respectful decision can remain valid even if someone dislikes it. You cannot rehearse enough to guarantee understanding. Some people may misunderstand you no matter how carefully you speak. Others may judge from their own needs, fears, or limited information. Your task is not to prepare a perfect defense against every possible opinion. Your task is to act as honestly as you can and remain open to useful feedback. This is a more balanced position. You do not become stubborn. You listen when another person sees something you missed. But you also stop treating every imagined disagreement as an emergency. The future rehearsal can appear in happy situations too. You may receive good news and immediately begin thinking about what could go wrong. A new relationship begins, and the mind jumps to the possibility of betrayal. A new opportunity appears, and you start predicting failure. The present offers joy, but the ego refuses to enter fully because joy creates vulnerability. The more valuable something feels, the more painful its loss would be. So the mind moves ahead and practices losing it. This may seem like emotional protection. In truth, it reduces the amount of life you receive. You do not protect joy by refusing to feel it. You only make the present poorer. Everything changes, but that is not a reason to reject what is here. A beautiful sunset does not become meaningless because it will end. Its ending is part of what makes attention so important. Buddhist mindfulness does not ask you to possess the moment. It asks you to meet it. To meet a moment is different from trying to keep it, you know. It is passing, yet you allow yourself to be present. You do not rush forward to its loss. You do not turn impermanence into a reason for emotional distance. You let the experience be complete while it is here. This can be difficult for people who have learned that happiness is followed by pain. They become suspicious of peace. When life becomes calm, the mind starts searching for the hidden threat. It asks, why is everything going well? What am I missing? How long will this last? The person may unconsciously create conflict because familiar tension feels safer than unfamiliar peace. At least tension is known. Peace leaves space, and space allows uncertainty. The ego may prefer a predictable problem to an unpredictable possibility. This is why learning to remain in a good moment can be a spiritual practice. When something is peaceful, notice the urge to leave it mentally. Notice how quickly the mind starts planning, worrying, or searching. Return gently, feel your feet, hear the sound in the room, notice the face in front of you, receive the meal, the conversation, the rest, or the silence. You do not need to make the moment last forever. You only need to stop abandoning it before it ends. The future rehearsal also steals energy from ordinary tasks. You may be washing dishes while thinking about next month. You may be speaking to someone while preparing for a later meeting. You may be resting while mentally arranging tomorrow. The body completes one activity, but the mind lives somewhere else. This division creates a feeling that life is always unfinished. You are never fully inside what you are doing because attention is already moving toward the next demand. Even peaceful tasks become stressful because they carry the weight of everything that follows. A simple meal becomes the beginning of a busy evening. Sunday becomes preparation for Monday. A conversation becomes a rehearsal for another conversation. The present is treated only as a bridge to the future. Eventually, years can pass this way. You keep preparing to live, but living always remains one step ahead. The ego says, once this problem is solved, I will be present. Once I know the outcome, I will relax. Once this season passes, I will enjoy life. But after one season comes another. The habit of leaving the present does not end simply because circumstances improve. It finds a new future to occupy. Presence must be practiced before conditions are perfect. This does not require a silent retreat or a life without responsibilities. It begins in ordinary moments. When eating, taste the food. When walking, feel the movement. When listening, stop preparing your reply for a few seconds. When resting, let rest be the task. When fear creates a future scene, notice the scene and return to what the senses can confirm. This may sound small, but the ego is weakened through small returns. You do not defeat future thinking once and forever. You return each time you notice that you have left. The return itself is the practice. At first, you may realize that your mind has been gone for 20 minutes. Later, you may notice after 5 minutes. With time, you may catch the first sentence of the prediction. What if this goes badly? You hear it, breathe, and ask, is there something useful to do now? If yes, act. If no, return. This simple question prevents planning from becoming mental hiding. Another useful practice is to set a boundary around preparation. Give yourself a certain amount of time to think about a future task. Write the key points, identify reasonable risks, and choose the next action. When the time ends, stop. The mind may continue offering new possibilities. Write them down only if they are truly new and useful. Otherwise, remind yourself, this has already been considered. Without a boundary, worry can disguise itself as unlimited responsibility. The ego says that stopping is careless, but thought does not become wiser merely because it continues longer. After a certain point, it repeats itself with different words. You may also ask whether the future scene is helping you practice or helping you avoid. A musician rehearses to improve skill. A speaker may practice an opening. A person may prepare how to state a difficult boundary. This kind of rehearsal has contact with action. It makes the real behavior more possible. Avoidant rehearsal delays action. It becomes so detailed that the person feels they must prepare more before beginning. The rehearsal replaces the experience rather than supporting it. The difference can be seen in movement. Does the thinking lead to a clear step, or does it create another round of thinking? If you have rehearsed a request many times, perhaps the next practice is making the request. If you have planned the first page repeatedly, perhaps the next practice is writing an imperfect first sentence. If you have studied every possible route, perhaps the next practice is beginning the journey. Reality teaches what thought cannot. You may discover that the conversation is easier than expected. The project may require different skills than you predicted. The first mistake may show you more than a month of planning. The ego resists this because reality removes its position as the only authority. Experience introduces information the mind could not create in advance. This is why action often quiets anxiety more effectively than additional analysis. Not reckless action, but one measured step. You stop trying to solve the entire future and interact with one part of the present. The mind may say, but one step is not enough. It is enough for now. The future is not lived all at once. It arrives as separate moments. You will meet the next step after taking this one. This is how a person crosses a long distance, not by mentally carrying the entire road, but by placing one foot where the body is. The ego rehearses disasters because it tries to carry the whole road before walking. It wants to know where every difficulty will appear. It wants to know how tired you will become. It wants to know whether the destination will justify the journey. But some answers exist only after movement. The need to predict can also damage decision-making. You may believe that considering more outcomes will always produce a better choice. But too many imagined futures can make every option look dangerous. Choose one path, and you imagine what will be lost on the others. Choose another, and you imagine a different regret. The mind wants a decision with no cost, no uncertainty, and no possibility of disappointment. Such a decision rarely exists. A mature choice does not eliminate every painful possibility. It accepts that every real path includes limits. You choose based on values, evidence, and what matters most. Then you stop trying to live every alternative life in your head. This is important because the mind may repeatedly visit the path not taken. It predicts how much better life could have been. It builds a future from a choice you did not make. This imagined life is always incomplete because it contains only the parts your current feelings select. You see the benefits and ignore the unknown difficulties. The ego then compares a real life, with all its imperfections, to an invented future that never had to face reality. No real life can win that comparison. Presence asks you to stop negotiating with lives that do not exist. The decision may have been imperfect. You may learn and choose differently later. But your power is here, inside the life that followed. The present is where regret becomes wisdom. The future rehearsal also appears as a need to predict how long pain will last. When suffering begins, the mind asks, "Will I always feel this way?" It takes one painful hour and stretches it across an entire life. This makes the current feeling heavier. You are not only experiencing sadness now, you are imagining endless sadness. You are not only anxious today, you are predicting years of anxiety. But emotions do not remain exactly the same. They rise, change shape, soften, return, and pass. Even when a difficult condition lasts, your relationship with it can change. The future version created during the most painful moment is rarely reliable. When the mind says, "This will never end," return to a smaller truth. "This is what I feel now." That does not minimize the pain. It removes the imagined eternity attached to it. You do not need to know how you will feel next month to care for yourself in this hour. You may need water, rest, a calm conversation, professional support, a walk, a pause from difficult information. These are present responses to present needs. The ego may dislike their simplicity because it wants a complete rescue plan. But healing often occurs through many small responses, not one perfect prediction. Buddhist teaching repeatedly returns to direct experience because the present is where suffering can be understood. You cannot observe tomorrow's breath. You cannot release next week's anger. You cannot practice compassion in a conversation that exists only in thought. Practice happens here, this breath, this sensation, this thought, this choice. The mind may call this too small. It wants a grand answer to the whole future, yet life is always appearing in small forms. A sound, a movement, a word, a feeling, a decision. When you meet these forms clearly, you are living. When you rush past them toward an imagined future, life becomes an idea. There is another hidden reason the ego rehearses tomorrow. It wants to avoid the emptiness of now. The present may feel ordinary. There may be no emergency, achievement, or clear problem to solve. For a mind used to tension, this quietness can feel uncomfortable. Future thinking creates drama. It gives the ego a role. It becomes the planner, defender, rescuer, or survivor. Without a future problem, it may not know who to be. This is why some people continue worrying even after all reasonable action has been taken. The worry provides identity. It makes them feel engaged with life, but presence asks for no performance. It may simply ask you to sit, breathe, and exist without solving anything. This can feel strangely vulnerable. You meet boredom, restlessness, loneliness, unprocessed emotion. The future had been covering these experiences. When the mind becomes quiet, what was hidden may rise. You may discover that you were not only planning, you were avoiding grief. You were not only predicting conflict, you were avoiding the discomfort of speaking honestly. You were not only preparing for failure, you were avoiding the shame you already felt. Future rehearsal can keep the mind busy enough to avoid the heart. When you recognize this, do not attack the habit. Ask what the future thinking is protecting you from feeling now. Perhaps sadness is here. Perhaps uncertainty is here. Perhaps you feel unimportant when there is nothing to accomplish. Perhaps silence reminds you of something you have not faced. Let the feeling be present without immediately turning it into a story about tomorrow. Place a hand on the body if that feels natural. Breathe. Name what is here in simple words. Fear is here. Loneliness is here. Pressure is here. You do not need to know where the feeling will lead. Stay with its current form. Often, feelings become more manageable when they are experienced directly. The imagined future makes them larger because it multiplies them across time. A small fear becomes a lifetime of danger. One disappointment becomes proof of permanent failure. A moment of loneliness becomes a future without love. Presence returns the feeling to its actual size. This does not mean it becomes easy. Some emotions are deep and require support, patience, and time. But you stop adding a future that has not happened. The ego may also use positive future fantasies to avoid the present. It imagines success, recognition, love, or a perfect new life. These thoughts feel pleasant, so they may not appear harmful. Hope is valuable. A meaningful vision can guide action. But fantasy becomes avoidance when the future is used to escape current responsibility. You picture the life you want while ignoring the small work it requires. You imagine being understood while avoiding honest communication. You imagine peace in another place while carrying the same restless habits. You imagine becoming confident later while refusing to practice courage now. The future self becomes a rescuer who is expected to possess qualities you are unwilling to build today. You say, "One day I will be disciplined. One day I will set boundaries. One day I will live differently." But the future self is created by the choices made in the present. Tomorrow cannot suddenly produce a person you refuse to practice becoming now. This truth is not meant to create pressure. It is meant to return power. You do not need to transform your whole life today. You need one action that agrees with the direction you value. The ego prefers the grand future because it avoids the humility of the small beginning. Dreaming of a finished life feels better than being a beginner. But every real change begins before confidence is complete. You begin with an awkward conversation, an imperfect routine, a small refusal, a simple page, a few minutes of practice. The present does not look as impressive as the fantasy, but it contains the only doorway to it. When you notice yourself living in a positive future, ask, what part of this vision can be practiced now? If you want a calmer life, practice one calm response. If you want stronger relationships, listen fully in one conversation. If you want meaningful work, give attention to one useful task. If you want freedom, release one habit that keeps you trapped. Bring the future back in the form of present action. This prevents hope from becoming another hiding place. Presence does not remove planning, memory, ambition, or imagination. It places them in service of life. You remember in order to learn. You plan in order to act. You imagine in order to create. Then you return. The mind is a useful visitor to the future, but a poor permanent resident there. You can go forward to consider a possibility, then come back with something useful. The problem begins when you leave your whole life behind. A simple daily practice can help. At several points during the day, ask, where is my mind? Not where is my body? The body may be at home, at work, or with someone you love. Where is your attention? Is it replaying yesterday? Is it rehearsing tomorrow? Is it here? Do not judge the answer. Notice it. Then ask, what is happening now? Name 3 simple facts. The room is quiet. My hands are resting. Someone is speaking. The task is in front of me. This brings the mind out of its story and back into contact. You may need to return 100 times. That is not failure. Each return is the moment of practice. The ego may claim that presence will make you unprepared. Test this belief carefully. You may find that a present mind responds better because it is not crowded by imagined scenes. It hears what is actually said. It notices what has changed. It sees opportunities that prediction missed. It uses energy where action is possible. A mind trapped in rehearsal may appear prepared, but it is often prepared only for its own story. When reality differs, it struggles to adjust. Presence creates flexibility. You arrive without demanding that the moment follow your script. You carry values rather than memorized reactions. You know the truth you want to express, but remain willing to listen. You have a plan, but can revise it. You recognize risk, but do not invent danger where none is visible. This is a deeper intelligence than constant prediction. It is intelligence in relationship with reality. There will still be times when planning is necessary. Important decisions deserve thought. Complex tasks require preparation. Real dangers should not be ignored. The lesson is not to stop thinking ahead. It is to notice when thinking ahead stops serving the present. Planning should lead back to action. Prediction should not replace observation. Preparation should have a stopping point. Hope should not delay participation. Fear should not be allowed to write tomorrow as though it were already certain. When you understand this, the future becomes lighter. It is no longer a place you must enter early and control. It becomes a space that will reveal itself in time. You can make wise preparations and leave room for life. You can trust the future version of yourself to meet what arrives. You can admit that some surprises will come, and that surprise is not the same as destruction. You can stop trying to feel tomorrow's emotions today. This is a form of compassion. You stop forcing the body to endure events that may never occur. You stop asking the heart to grieve losses that have not happened. You stop turning each quiet moment into preparation for pain. You allow today to remain today. The ego will continue offering stories. It may say, "Think about this once more. You may have missed something." Sometimes it will be correct. A new fact may require attention, but often it is only repeating an old fear. Learn the difference by asking whether the thought contains new information or only new language. If there is new information, consider it. If there is no new information, return. You do not need to defeat the thought. You simply stop feeding it with another hour. Gradually, the mind learns that it does not need to predict everything to keep you safe. It sees that you can prepare without obsessing. You can enter conversations without controlling every word. You can make plans without living inside them. Most importantly, it learns that the present is not an empty space between problems. It is your life. The cup in your hand is your life. The person speaking to you is your life. The tired body asking for rest is your life. The quiet evening you keep using to worry about tomorrow is your life. The ego keeps telling you that the important moment is coming later. Later you will know. Later you will be ready. Later you will relax. But later always arrives as now. If you have not learned to enter now, you will meet each future moment with the same habit of leaving it. Peace begins when you stop treating the present as preparation for life and recognize that it is life. You do not have to know how everything will unfold. You do not need to rehearse every possible pain. You do not have to prepare a defense against people who have not spoken. You can meet what is here. You can take one useful action. You can leave the rest untouched until it becomes real. This is not carelessness. It is the wisdom of giving each moment only the burden that belongs to it. Today does not need to carry tomorrow's disaster. This conversation does not need to contain every future conversation. This mistake does not need to predict your entire life. This uncertainty does not need an immediate ending. When the mind runs ahead, call it back gently, not with anger, but with understanding. It learned to rehearse because it wanted to protect you. Thank it for trying. Then remind it that you no longer need to live every future before it comes. The surprise may still arrive. The conversation may be difficult. The plan may change. But you will be there, not the frightened version of you created inside today's prediction. The real you, standing inside the real moment, with real information and real choices. That is enough. And once you stop living inside futures that have not happened, you begin to see how many wounds are kept alive by questions that may never be answered. Some people never explain themselves. Some losses never reveal a satisfying reason. Yet an unanswered question does not have to become a permanent home for pain. And once you stop living inside futures that have not happened, another truth becomes impossible to avoid. Some answers may never arrive. Some people will never explain themselves. Some apologies will never be spoken. Some endings will remain incomplete, no matter how long you wait. Yet the unanswered question does not have to become the place where your life remains trapped. There are wounds created not only by what happened, but by what was never said afterward. A person harms you and refuses to admit it. A relationship ends without an honest conversation. Someone disappears after making promises. A loved one dies before important words can be exchanged. A family secret remains hidden. An opportunity closes and no one tells you why. The mind feels the unfinished space and keeps returning to it. It asks the same questions in different forms. What really happened? What were they thinking? Did they ever care? Was the whole relationship false? Why was I treated that way? What would they say if they were finally honest? These questions may remain active for years, because the mind believes an answer will repair something inside you. It sees the missing information as the final piece of the wound. It thinks that once the truth is known, the pain will become organized, understandable, and easier to carry. Sometimes an answer does help. Honest communication can correct a false belief. An apology can acknowledge harm. New information can remove unnecessary guilt. But when the answer is unavailable, the mind can turn its absence into a second injury. The original event happened once. The unanswered question repeats it. Each time the question returns, you mentally enter the same room. You examine the same silence. You feel the same confusion. The person may be gone, but the conversation continues inside you. You ask them questions. You predict their defense. You prepare what you would say if they finally admitted the truth. This inner conversation can become so familiar that it begins to feel like part of your identity. You become the person waiting for an explanation. The wound is no longer only something that happened to you. It becomes the place from which you understand yourself, other people, and the future. Buddhist wisdom does not ask you to pretend the unanswered question does not matter. It asks whether you will allow the absence of an answer to control the rest of your life. This is a difficult question because waiting can feel like loyalty to the truth. You may believe that releasing the question means accepting a lie. You may fear that moving forward allows the person to escape responsibility. You may think that peace would make the harm seem less serious. But your continued suffering does not make another person more accountable. It does not force honesty into their heart. It does not correct the past. It does not prove your experience more clearly. It only keeps your present connected to their refusal. You can know that something was wrong without receiving a confession. You can trust your experience without winning an argument. You can name a pattern even if the person denies it. You can choose distance without receiving their agreement. The absence of an apology does not erase the need for one. It only reveals that the person may be unwilling or unable to offer it. Some people do not apologize because they do not understand the damage they caused. Others understand, but pride prevents them from speaking. Some fear that admitting one wrong will destroy the image they have built of themselves. Some apologize only when they believe forgiveness will restore their access to you. An apology requires more than words. It requires the courage to see yourself as the cause of another person's pain without immediately escaping into excuses. Not everyone has developed that courage. You may wait for an apology from someone whose entire identity depends on believing they did nothing wrong. If they admitted the truth, they would have to question years of behavior, choices, and stories. Denial may be protecting them from shame. This does not excuse the harm. It helps you understand why waiting may be useless. You cannot force a person to become emotionally honest by suffering long enough. You cannot make them see by explaining the wound one more time if they have already decided not to look. There comes a moment when the repeated request for acknowledgement becomes another way of asking an unavailable person to care for the injury they created. Sometimes they will not. This is painful because part of you still believes the person who caused the wound should be the one to repair it. This desire makes sense. If someone breaks something valuable, responsibility suggests they should help restore it. But emotional life does not always follow that fairness. The person may leave before repair begins. They may refuse contact. They may have died. They may continue denying your reality. They may offer an apology that contains no understanding. Your healing cannot remain impossible simply because the responsible person refuses to participate. At some point, the work must be taken out of their hands. This does not mean taking responsibility for their actions. It means taking responsibility for what continues inside you. Their behavior belongs to them. The care of your present mind belongs to you. There is power in this distinction. You stop asking, how can I make them understand? You begin asking, what do I need even if they never understand? Perhaps you need protection from further contact. Perhaps you need someone trustworthy to hear your experience. Perhaps you need to grieve the relationship you thought you had. Perhaps you need to stop defending the person because accepting the truth feels painful. The unanswered question may be hiding a harder answer that has already appeared through behavior. You may ask why they repeatedly hurt you, while their pattern shows that they did not value the consequences enough to change. You may ask whether they cared, while their actions reveal that whatever they felt was not strong enough to produce respect. You may ask why they disappeared, while their silence shows their inability to handle discomfort honestly. These may not be complete explanations, but they may be sufficient information. The mind often rejects sufficient truth because it wants satisfying truth. A satisfying answer would explain everything and reduce the pain. Sufficient truth only gives you enough clarity to make a wise choice. It may not answer every emotional question, but it shows you what kind of behavior occurred and what you must do next. You may never know what was inside another person's mind. You can still recognize what their actions created in your life. This protects you from becoming trapped in motive. People often excuse harmful behavior because they are unsure whether the person intended to cause pain. They say, perhaps they did not mean it. This may be true, but intention is only one part of the situation. A person can cause serious harm without planning it. Lack of awareness does not remove the effect. If the behavior continues after the effect has been explained, the refusal to change becomes important information. You do not need proof of cruelty to protect yourself from repeated carelessness. You do not need to understand every motive before setting a boundary. The question, why did they do this, may never be fully answered. The question, what does this behavior require from me now, is often more useful. One question keeps attention inside their mind. The other returns attention to your life. Unanswered questions also appear after loss. Someone may die suddenly, leaving conversations unfinished. You may carry questions about their final thoughts, choices, feelings, or suffering. You may wonder whether they knew how much you loved them. You may regret what you did not say. Grief can become tightly attached to these questions because there is no possibility of receiving a direct reply. The mind may create different versions of the final conversation. In one version, the person forgives you. In another, they explain a hidden choice. In another, you say everything perfectly. These inner conversations can offer temporary comfort, but they may also keep you negotiating with an ending that cannot be reversed. The pain is not always asking for an answer. Sometimes it is asking for permission to mourn what will remain unfinished. Every close relationship contains unfinished moments. No two people say everything. No final conversation can summarize a whole life. Even when death is expected, words remain unsaid. The belief that you needed one perfect ending may come from the ego's discomfort with human limitation. Love was never perfect communication. It was also shared. Meals, Ordinary help, repeated presence, laughter, patience, conflict, and return. What you meant to each other may be larger than the final words you exchanged. If you regret something, let the regret become tenderness rather than lifelong punishment. Speak the words privately. Write them down. Allow yourself to feel the sadness of not being able to deliver them in the way you wanted. Then ask how those words can become part of the life you still have. An apology you can no longer give to one person may become greater care toward others. Love you did not express enough may become a reason to speak more openly now. A lesson learned too late for one relationship may still protect another. This does not replace the person. It prevents unfinished love from becoming frozen love. Some unanswered questions concern injustice. You may ask why a painful event happened to someone who did not deserve it. There may be no moral explanation. Suffering does not always follow a pattern that satisfies the human sense of fairness. When no answer comes, people sometimes blame themselves, fate, or a higher power because blame feels more stable than meaninglessness. A painful explanation may feel easier than uncertainty. You may think, perhaps this happened because I failed. Perhaps I was being punished. Perhaps I should have seen it coming. These beliefs create an answer, but not necessarily a true one. The mind may prefer self-blame because it gives a strange sense of control. If you caused everything, then perhaps future pain can be prevented through perfect behavior. Accepting that some events were beyond your control feels more frightening, but carrying false guilt does not honor the loss. It only adds another wound. Responsibility should be based on what you reasonably knew, chose, and could influence at the time. It should not be built from knowledge that appeared only afterward. After an event, signs can seem obvious. The mind arranges the past into a clear story. It says you should have known what the signs meant. But before the outcome, those signs may have been mixed with many ordinary details. You cannot judge your earlier awareness using the complete picture that became visible later. This is especially important after betrayal. You may ask how you failed to notice. You remember moments that now appear suspicious. You criticize yourself for trusting. But trust is not evidence of stupidity. Trust becomes painful when another person misuses it. The shame belongs to the misuse, not to the human ability to believe someone. The lesson is not to stop trusting forever. It is to become more attentive to patterns, boundaries, and the relationship between words and actions. Do not turn an unanswered betrayal into a permanent argument against your own heart. If you decide that trusting was the mistake, you may protect yourself from betrayal by also protecting yourself from closeness. The person who hurt you then continues shaping relationships they never entered. The wound becomes lifelong, not because the original person remains, but because their behavior becomes the rule you use for everyone else. One person's dishonesty becomes proof that honesty is impossible. One abandonment becomes proof that everyone leaves. One hidden motive becomes proof that kindness cannot be trusted. The mind believes these conclusions prevent surprise. Instead, they carry the old wound into every new encounter. Buddhist practice encourages direct attention rather than universal conclusions. See this person as this person. See this moment as this moment. Observe the evidence that is actually present. Do not force the future to answer for the past. This does not mean becoming naive. Wisdom remembers without becoming imprisoned by memory. You can recognize a familiar warning sign and still remain open to the fact that not every similar detail leads to the same outcome. A delayed reply from one person may have meant avoidance. From another, it may mean a busy day. A disagreement in one relationship may have led to punishment. In a healthier relationship, it may lead to deeper understanding. The past can inform your attention without controlling your interpretation. An unanswered question becomes a prison when it turns into a permanent conclusion. The bars are often made of words such as always, never, everyone, and nothing. I will never understand. I can never trust again. Everyone eventually reveals a hidden side. Nothing good lasts. These statements feel powerful because they remove uncertainty. They also remove possibility. The mind would rather close every door than risk another unexpected wound. But closing every door does not heal the injury. It builds a life around avoiding it. Healing means the old wound no longer makes every decision. You may still remember. You may still feel sadness when something reminds you. But the memory is no longer allowed to decide who deserves access, what opportunities you take, or how much joy you permit yourself to feel. This change happens slowly. You do not wake one morning without questions. The goal is not to eliminate every thought. The goal is to stop treating each thought as an order to return. When the question appears, notice it. Why did they do it? Then ask whether anything new can be learned now. If new information is available and useful, consider it. If the question is only repeating itself, recognize the loop. You can say, "This question has visited before. It does not have a new answer today." This prevents the mind from presenting an old circle as fresh work. A thought can feel urgent without being useful. The body may react when the question returns. The chest tightens, the stomach changes, anger rises. This physical response can make the thought seem important. Instead of following it into another hour of analysis, attend to the body. The wound may need regulation more than explanation. Slow the breath. Feel the support beneath you. Notice what is visible in the room. Allow the body to receive the message that the original event is not occurring now. The memory is present. The event is not. This difference matters. When the nervous system reacts to an old wound, the mind may search for an explanation because explanation feels like action. But the immediate need may be to return to safety. You do not have to solve the past while the body is in alarm. Calm first, reflect later. This practice allows you to respond with greater clarity. You may discover that the question becomes less urgent once the body settles. What seemed like an intellectual problem was partly an emotional wave. Waves do not need answers. They need space to rise and fall. Some questions continue because they are connected to the need for validation. You want another person to confirm that your pain was real. Perhaps people around you minimized what happened. They told you to move on, stop thinking about it, or be grateful it was not worse. This can create a second wound. You begin questioning your own experience. Was I too sensitive? Did I misunderstand? Am I making it larger than it was? The lack of validation makes you search more intensely for proof. Self-validation does not mean assuming every interpretation is correct. It means acknowledging that your emotional experience occurred. You can review facts honestly while still respecting the pain. You may say, "I do not know everything they intended, but I know this affected me deeply. I may have made mistakes too, but that does not make all behavior acceptable. My pain does not need to be the greatest pain in the world to deserve care." This restores inner ground. You no longer require everyone to agree before you are permitted to heal. There may be people who never understand your experience because understanding it would force them to examine their own role. Others may lack the emotional range to hold what you tell them. Some may compare your pain to their own and become dismissive. Their inability to validate you is not proof that your experience was false. Choose carefully where you seek understanding. A wise friend, counselor, teacher, or support group may help you place the event in a larger context. Being witnessed by someone safe can reduce the need to return repeatedly to the person who harmed you. This is not about creating an audience that agrees with everything. It is about finding a space where honesty, compassion, and thoughtful reflection are possible. The wound becomes more manageable when it is no longer hidden or denied. Yet even supportive people cannot provide the final answer to every question. At some point, the practice returns to you. Can you live without knowing exactly what was inside another person? Can you accept that a relationship contained both real moments and serious harm? Can you allow the story to remain complex? The ego prefers simple categories. If someone hurt you, it may decide they never cared. If some moments were loving, it may decide the harm should be forgiven without examination. Reality can contain contradiction. A person may have cared and still lacked the maturity to treat you well. A relationship may have contained genuine joy and unhealthy patterns. Someone may regret hurting you and still be unwilling to change. Recognizing complexity can reduce the pressure to find one final explanation. The answer may not be that everything was true or everything was false. Different truths may exist together. This is difficult because mixed truth does not produce the clean ending the ego wants. It asks you to hold love and disappointment, gratitude and anger, memory and boundary. Buddhist wisdom calls this the capacity to remain with reality without forcing it into a simpler shape. You can appreciate what was good without returning to what was harmful. You can honor the love without denying the wound. You can miss the person and still know that distance is necessary. You can forgive part of the story while remaining uncertain about another part. This emotional maturity prevents unanswered questions from becoming lifelong wounds because you no longer require the story to become perfectly consistent. Human beings are not perfectly consistent. They act from different states of mind. Fear may rule them one day and tenderness another. This does not remove responsibility. It explains why one simple answer may never capture the whole person. Sometimes the question that keeps you trapped is not about another person. It is about yourself. You may ask why you remained, why you did not speak, why you returned, or why you accepted something that now seems unacceptable. The answer may involve loneliness, hope, fear, financial need, lack of experience, family conditioning, or emotional attachment. But even after understanding these influences, you may continue punishing yourself. Self-punishment can become an attempt to prove that you have learned. You believe that if you remain angry with yourself, you will never repeat the mistake. But shame does not always make you wiser. It can make you secretive, fearful, and disconnected from your own needs. A better lesson is specific. I ignored repeated behavior because I focused on promises. I stayed silent because I feared losing the relationship. I accepted too much because I confused patience with love. Specific insight gives you something to practice. Shame only says, "Something is wrong with me." An unanswered question about your past self does not need a perfect psychological explanation. You need enough compassion to understand the conditions and enough responsibility to choose differently. You can tell your past self, "I see why you were afraid. I also see what that fear cost us. We will not choose the same way now." This is both gentle and firm. It turns memory into guidance rather than punishment. You may never know why you tolerated something for as long as you did. Human behavior can be complex, but you can know the signs you will take seriously now. You can know what boundary you will set. You can know when you will ask for help. You can know what values you refuse to betray again. The future does not need a complete explanation of the past. It needs the wisdom you were able to gather. There is also the question of meaning. After a deep loss, people often ask what the suffering was meant to teach them. This search can be helpful when meaning grows naturally, but forcing meaning can become another burden. You may not be ready to call the experience a lesson. You may never believe it was necessary. You may not discover a reason that makes it feel worthwhile. Acceptance does not require you to turn every wound into a gift. Sometimes, the meaning is not found inside the event. It is created through how you live afterward. The betrayal itself may contain no hidden blessing, but your response can lead to stronger boundaries. The loss may remain tragic, but your tenderness toward others can deepen. The injustice may remain wrong, but you may choose to prevent similar harm where you can. Meaning can be an action rather than an explanation. This returns you to life. Instead of asking endlessly, "Why did this happen?" you begin asking, "What will I do with the life that remains?" This question does not make the suffering acceptable. It prevents the suffering from becoming the only force shaping your future. Your answer may change over time. At first, the answer may be simply to survive the day. Later, it may be to speak, create, teach, protect, forgive, or begin again. There is no need to rush. The ego may demand a powerful purpose immediately because emptiness feels unbearable. Buddhist patience allows meaning to emerge through lived experience. You do not have to know today what the wound will mean in 10 years. You only need to stop feeding the belief that your life cannot continue until meaning appears. Ordinary living is allowed. You can cook, work, laugh, rest and care for others while some questions remain. You do not betray the past by experiencing a peaceful day. This is important because guilt sometimes keeps people loyal to pain. They fear that healing means forgetting. They worry that joy will make the loss seem unimportant. But memory and suffering are not the same. You can remember someone without remaining broken in the same way. You can honor what happened without carrying its heaviest form forever. A wound healing does not mean the event no longer mattered. It means the body and mind were allowed to continue living. Think of how the body responds to injury. It does not keep the wound open to prove that damage occurred. It closes, repairs, and forms new tissue. The scar remembers in another way. Emotional healing can work similarly. You do not erase the story. You stop reopening it each day to check whether it still hurts. A scar may remain sensitive. Certain dates, places, or words may awaken emotion. This does not mean the wound has returned to its first condition. Do not turn every difficult day into proof that you have made no progress. Healing is not the absence of memory. It is the return of choice. You remember, but you can decide what to do next. You feel sadness, but it does not automatically consume the whole day. You hear the old question, but you are not required to answer it again. Choice is the door out of the emotional prison. The prison is maintained by automatic return. A trigger appears and you enter the same story. Awareness creates a pause. Inside that pause you may say, "This memory deserves kindness, but it does not need another investigation." Then choose an action that belongs to the present. Drink water, step outside, speak to someone safe, continue the task, rest. Write what you feel without sending it to the person. The action may seem ordinary, but it reminds the nervous system that life exists beyond the question. With practice, attention becomes less loyal to the wound. This does not happen through force. If you command yourself never to think about it, the mind may return more strongly. Instead, acknowledge the thought without building a home around it. There is the old question. There is the desire for an apology. There is the wish that the ending had been different. You see it, but you do not become it. This is the Buddhist practice of observing mental events as temporary conditions. A thought arises because certain memories and emotions meet. It remains for a time, then it changes. The thought is not a final truth merely because it appeared. You do not need to follow every thought to its conclusion. This realization is deeply freeing. The mind may continue producing questions, but your peace no longer depends on silencing the mind completely. It depends on not handing each question control over your attention. Over time, the unanswered question becomes smaller. It may not disappear, but it loses its position at the center of your life. Other experiences begin to grow around it. New relationships, new skills, new forms of understanding, a stronger sense of self. The wound becomes one part of a much larger life. This is how an emotional prison opens. The walls may not fall in one dramatic moment. Space simply begins appearing where there was once only pain. You notice that you went an entire morning without thinking about the person. You hear their name and recover more quickly. You no longer feel the need to explain the entire story to everyone. You stop checking whether they have changed. You become more interested in your own direction than in their consequences. These are signs that the unanswered question is no longer governing you. The ego may try to pull you back by saying that you are becoming careless or cold. It may ask whether you are letting them escape. Remember, healing is not a legal judgment. You are not declaring the behavior acceptable. You are withdrawing your life from the endless trial. The truth can remain true without being argued every day. What happened can remain wrong without becoming your daily residence. You are allowed to close the courtroom even when the accused never confesses. You are allowed to walk away from a door that never opened. You are allowed to stop asking silence to speak. Perhaps one day an answer will arrive. The person may return with an apology. New information may appear. Time may reveal something you did not understand. If that happens, you can meet the answer then. You do not need to remain wounded in preparation for it. You do not have to keep your life emotionally paused so the answer can find you in the same condition. A late answer may help. It may also disappoint you. You may discover that the explanation is ordinary, selfish, confused, or incomplete. By then you may realize that your healing did not require it after all. The greatest freedom is not receiving every answer. It is becoming someone whose life no longer depends on receiving them. You can still value honesty. You can still ask reasonable questions. You can still seek justice and accountability. But you stop turning unavailable information into a condition for peace. You take what is known. You respect what was, felt. You learn what can be learned. You release the demand that the remaining darkness become light before you move. The unanswered parts of your life may always exist. Every human story contains them. We do not fully know the minds of those closest to us. We do not understand every turning point. We cannot see all the causes behind every loss. Yet life can remain meaningful without complete explanation. A song can move you without knowing every thought of the person who wrote it. A friendship can matter even if it ends. A season can shape you even if you never understand why it arrived. Not everything valuable becomes complete. Not everything incomplete must remain painful forever. Peace begins when you stop asking the unanswered question to become something it cannot become. You stop demanding that silence turn into an apology, that absence produce a reason, or that the past return with the missing piece. You meet the wound with compassion instead of interrogation. You say, "I wish I had the answer. I may always wish that. But I will not sacrifice the rest of my life to this question." That is not defeat. It is a boundary placed around suffering. The question may visit, but it may not take over the house. The memory may speak, but it may not make every decision. The person may never apologize, but their silence will not become your identity. The relationship may have ended without honesty, but your future relationships do not have to inherit that dishonesty. The loss may offer no satisfying meaning, but you can still create meaning through the care you bring to the life before you. This is how an unanswered question stops becoming a lifelong wound. Not because the mystery disappears, but because your attachment to solving it softens. You no longer believe your peace is hidden in a sentence someone failed to speak. You discover that peace can begin in your own decision to stop waiting. And when you stop waiting for unanswered questions to release you, a deeper source of suffering becomes visible. The pain did not come only from what happened. Part of it came from the mind's demand that what happened should have been different. Reality created the first wound, but resistance may have been creating another one every day. Subscribe to the channel and become part of a community choosing peace over pressure, wisdom over worry, and awareness over the demands of the ego. Here, we explore Buddhist teachings that help you release control, stop chasing certainty, let go of painful attachments, and return to the present moment with a calmer mind. Each video is created to help you understand yourself more deeply and live with greater freedom, compassion, and inner strength. If this message brought you clarity, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and continue this journey with us. Your next step toward peace may begin with the next lesson.